He was young, and this was something that was known to all. But when sun-moon tears looked at him, they could only judge that he was less than 1,000 years old, and heavenly body tears could only conclude that he was less than a century old. Yet the purple moon divine maiden had further limited his age to below 50. Even if there was only a difference of 50 years, a cultivator in the low extreme of the sun-moon tier would have a lifespan as long as 1 million years. Her perceptiveness was truly scary, to be able to make such a detailed judgment. Going by this trend, you may be able to advance to become a level 15 alchemist within 1,000 years. By that time, even I would have to ask you to concoct alchemical pills for me, the purple moon divine maiden said. A level 15 alchemist. Ling Han reckoned that the purple moon divine maiden should be in the high extreme of eternal river tier, and that was why she needed a level 15 divine pill. Thank you for the praise, milady. However, if I reach level 15, I am willing to concoct alchemical pills for milady without any conditions, Ling Han said. Oh. The purple moon divine maiden was astonished. Concocting alchemical pills without any conditions? This was not a small promise. The higher the level of the alchemist, the higher the price one would have to pay to ask them to concoct alchemical pills, especially from level 9 onwards. The time taken to concoct alchemical pills would be longer and longer, from a few months to a few years' time. Concocting a level 15 divine pill would need around 10 years' time. That was equivalent to wasting 10 years of his life. The lifespan of 10 years of a level 15 alchemist, how valuable was that? Thus, to ask a high-level alchemist to move required a very high price. Yet Ling Han actually said that he would concoct alchemical pills for her without conditions. This was too generous. Ling Han continued. Do you feel curious, milady? In truth, the reason is very simple. I have a lover who is currently in milady's purple moon army. I would like to ask milady to take care of her, which was why I was so generous. The purple moon divine maiden couldn't help but laugh loudly. The fact that Ling Han had been so honest, and spoke of his own motives so boldly, had instead earned her favor. She thought that this man was honest, and more importantly, was willing to make sacrifices for his woman. Young man, walk with me, she said. Yes, milady. The two of them left. Xie Donglai wanted to follow as well, yet with a casual wave of the purple moon divine maiden's hand, he had been thrown to who knew where. Young master. The two old servants hurriedly chased after that little black dot. Their mission was to protect Xie Donglai. The purple moon divine maiden was very curious about Ling Han, and asked him about the matters between himself and the heavenly phoenix divine maiden. She also understood the grudge between him and Xie Donglai, and couldn't help but say, then just let your little girlfriend stay temporarily in my army. Even if Xie Qian himself came, so what? Who would be afraid of him? She spoke these words with much forcefulness, her heroic spirit boundless. Thank you, milady, Ling Han said sincerely. Before they left the Cloud Apex planet, it should be safest for the heavenly phoenix divine maiden to stay in the purple moon divine maiden's army. After he had dealt with the 5 sects, they could return to the Great Ling Empire together, and by then, who would care who was Xie Qian? Hold on to this token. I give you special permission to enter into the Purple Moon Army once every month to meet your little girlfriend. The Purple Moon divine maiden tossed a metal plaque at Ling Han. Ling Han was overjoyed. Even though they could only meet once a month, the barracks of Purple Moon Army had never welcomed any male visitors, so he was really an exception. With a wave of her hand, the Purple Moon divine maiden's figure broke through the space, and disappeared in an instant. Heavenly body tears were capable of flight, and eternal river tears' speed was naturally even more amazing. Ling Han kept the token away, and involuntarily smiled. If she saw him boldly stride into the barracks, just how astonished would the heavenly phoenix divine maiden be? However, now that he had money, he naturally would be buying godly metal without restraint. Additionally, he also had to accumulate comprehension in seclusion to break through to the medium extreme. He once again returned to the auction house, and asked the latter to purchase godly metal above level 5 on his behalf. Ling Han himself was a level 8 alchemist, and added with the fact that the Purple Moon divine maiden seemed to look on him quite highly, this naturally caused Jin Ming to have an even higher opinion of Ling Han. The latter agreed happily with a nod, and even had no plans to collect any payment from Ling Han. As a token of friendship, he had said. There was naturally no disadvantage to having another friend, so Ling Han naturally accepted the latter's kindness happily. He first went to meet the heavenly phoenix divine maiden, and then entered into seclusion. Chapter 1270 Faceless. 2 months passed in a flash. Ling Han finished the stabilization of his cultivation level, and comprehended Tao beneath the reincarnation tree. This was of too much help. He could break through to the medium extreme, but did not begin immediately. Instead, he headed to the auction house first. Jianming had bought a great amount of godly metal for him, and after buying all of it, Ling Han turned from being massively rich to slightly rich. His wealth of close to 400 million true origin stones had been spent to the point where only about 300,000 remained. However, the amount of level 5 godly metal that he purchased was just about enough for the divine demon sword to advance. He let the divine demon sword continuously swallow godly metal, and after half a day, there was only less than 10 pounds of level 5 godly metal left, and the divine demon sword had also reached a state of satiation. It merely needed to eat one more small piece of godly metal, and it would be able to complete a qualitative change from level 5 to level 6. Ling Han did not rush to take this step. Instead, he himself began to break through to the medium extreme. He wanted to let the divine demon sword complete the qualitative change when he was undergoing the heavenly tribulation so that they could experience the tribulation together, which would in turn allow the divine demon sword's might to become stronger. Comprehending Tao underneath the reincarnation tree, time passed quickly. After a month, Ling Han had already comprehended Tao for 30 years. With a flash, he exited the Black Tower. Hong long long. Immediately, dense dark clouds appeared in the skies, forming dense thunderclouds. The strange thing was there were not just blazing white lightning bolts among the thunderclouds this time. There was actually black lightning too. This was the two-realm battlefield, so it was both the immortal realm and the netherworld. Hence, this heavenly tribulation also contained the unique traits of both realms. Ling Han had long since left Wolfang City. In any case, he was accumulating comprehension in the Black Tower, so there was no need for him to worry that he would be disturbed. Furthermore, after he had gathered enough comprehension, he could exit and directly experience the tribulation. There was no need for him to worry that he would bring disaster to others. As the thunderclouds rolled, terrifying lightning blazed, forming thunderbolts even wider than mountains. They suddenly descended down onto him. Quang! The heaven and earth shook. The path of cultivation was snatching the fortune of the heavens, and was not tolerated by the heaven and earth. Hence, a tribulation had to descend to allow this energy to return to the heaven and earth. Ling Han did not mind at all. His physique was much stronger than his cultivation level, so he would be fine no matter how much the heavenly tribulation attacked him. But for the sake of tempering his physique, he still took the initiative to shatter his godly bones. Beneath the tribulation, he would be able to advance to a higher level. The divine demon sword also swallowed the last piece of godly metal, and completed the qualitative boost, similarly being tempered underneath the heavenly tribulation. There were bits of scrap metal expelled from the sword's blade, and it was becoming even brighter, like a pool of water in fall, exuding a supreme divine might. This was a divine sword. Meanwhile, Ling Han was experiencing the power of the heavenly tribulation. Now its might was even greater, causing him to be able to perceive even more regulations of the heavenly tribulation, the rhythm of the great nature. Half a day later, the tribulation dispersed. Ling Han had not had enough. He had not comprehended enough yet. Never mind. When he freeloaded off of others' tribulations in future, they would all be of this grade, so there was no need to be impatient. If he couldn't manage to comprehend it with a single time, then he'd just do it a second time, and if 2 times weren't enough, he would go for 3. There would be a time when he could comprehend it fully. His divine demon sword trembled slightly, twining around Ling Han's body, and shooting out a frightening cold light. Ling Han by himself possessed extremely strong defenses and recovery abilities, and the divine demon sword had reached the pinnacle in terms of attack. If someone used the divine demon sword to attack him, then would his defenses win out, or would the divine demon sword prove to be sharper? Ling Han suddenly thought, and then immediately felt that he was purely seeking out his own torture. What was there to think about? Good sword. A compliment rang out from afar. He saw that it came from a white-robed person, whose face was covered with a white cloth. Even his hair had been wrapped inside. He did not show his eyes, nose, or mouth at all, appearing extremely bizarre. Moreover, his white robes were extremely spacious, so there was no way to discern whether he was man or woman from the figure alone. His voice even was extremely gender-neutral, so he could be a slightly feminine man, or could also be described as a more heroic woman. He stood on one leg, and there was a chain laid on his bent thigh. His right hand lightly strummed, and a tinkling melody immediately sounded, like a stream flowing over pebbles, very pleasant to hear. This person was very strong, Ling Han thought. He could not discern the exact cultivation level of this person, but had an instinctive feeling that this person was very, very strong. It was getting closer and closer to the two-realm prodigy gathering, and prodigies from all areas were popping up like bamboo shoots after a shower. Ling Han smiled slightly and said, "It is indeed a good sword. Can you bear to part with it?" the white-robed person asked. "Apologies, this is not for sale." Ling Han shook his head. The white-robed person flicked his fingers. Wang, 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 the sound of the chain rang out. He paused and said, "Then let us have a bet. If I win, you shall sell this sword to me." Ling Han laughed loudly and said, "I'm not interested." "Then how about a spar?" the white-robed person continued. He did not seem like he was about to give up any time soon. Ling Han's fighting spirit soared as well. He put away the divine demon sword and said, "All right." The white-robed person couldn't help but become anxious, and asked, "Why did you put away the sword?" "When the time comes that I should use it, I naturally will," Ling Han said, smiling. "Sir, how should I address you?" The white-robed person hesitated for a moment, and then replied, "Faceless." Faceless. Just covering his face, and he called himself Faceless. Then shouldn't Ling Han call himself Bodiless? "I am Ling Han." Ling Han clenched his fist. His physical defenses were invincible among his peers. Thus, he was very fond of using his bare hands. The feeling of directly using his fists to pummel his opponent was very pleasant. "Watch out!" Faceless strummed his chain strings. Wang, a sound wave actually took form, and became a sharp blade that slashed out towards Ling Han. Ling Han couldn't help but look shocked. This attack was extremely fierce. It actually caused him to feel a pressure from not being able to block it. This was not the other's aura, but rather that this attack was indeed that frightening. The other was in the consummate level of the Sun-Moon tier. No, no, no. Ling Han hurriedly used the star-plucking step. Even consummate level was not as powerful as this. It was not that he had never battled this kind of opponent. Pinnacle level. That was right, the other should have cultivated to the pinnacle level of the Sun-Moon tier, and that was the only possible way he could have such frightening abilities. It should be known that even though Ling Han had advanced into the medium extreme, his true battle prowess was in the late stage of the high extreme. He had not even touched the boundary of the consummate level. Yet, the other had already cultivated to the pinnacle level. Whether in terms of cultivation level or battle prowess, how huge was the gap between them? This was practically a hopeless situation. "Oh right. You are only in the early stage of the medium extreme." Faceless nodded, seeming to have just realized this fact. "I will suppress my cultivation level, and battle you on equal level." True enough, the aura he exuded immediately declined, yet it merely fell to the middle stage of the medium extreme because he could only seal off a complete set of sun and moon, and could not seal off half of a sun and half of a moon. He could only be in the middle stage of the medium extreme or the peak stage of the low extreme. Though Faceless was quite a fair character, he was not about to put himself at a disadvantage for the sake of being fair. Thus, in the choice of being close to Ling Han's cultivation level, he naturally chose to be stronger than Ling Han by one sub-minor level. There was no absolute fairness in this world, and this was already an extremely ideal result. Wang. Faceless once again strummed the strings of the chain. Wang. Another sound wave formed, slicing towards Ling Han. This time, Ling Han did not dodge any further. Instead, he clenched his fist to greet the incoming attack. Pang! The blade formed from the sound wave was forcefully shattered by Ling Han. With a battle cry, Ling Han charged towards Faceless. Chapter 1271. Like old friends. Faceless plucked the strings of his chain even faster. Wang wang wang. Melody reverberated through the air, and bursts of sound waves transformed into countless weapons that shot at Ling Han. The sky was almost blotted out by the tsunami of weapons. Their cold glints intertwined, creating an extremely harrowing scene. However, Ling Han was unafraid. He had advanced one minor level, and his physique had also elevated to the toughness of level 7 godly metal. Even if he faced the attack of a consummate level cultivator head-on, he would at most spit 2 mouthfuls of blood. Moreover, his opponent had suppressed his cultivation to the middle stage of the medium extreme. Thus, even if he possessed a battle prowess of 6 stars, it would still be incredibly difficult for him to injure Ling Han's physique. Pang pang pang. Ling Han launched a flurry of attacks and shattered the onslaught of sound wave attacks. He drew closer and closer to Faceless. Faceless appeared slightly astonished. When battling at the same cultivation level, his opponent was actually this powerful. However, this also stirred his fighting spirit. His hands became a blur as more sound waves surged from his chin. They didn't transform into sabers, swords, axes, and spears this time, instead gathering to form into a giant human. The giant measured 30 meters in height. It was dressed in a full suit of armor, and it held a massive axe in his hand. However, upon closer inspection, this giant was actually a corpse that had already shriveled to become a skeleton. Ignis Fatuus burned in its empty eyes, releasing an eerie and sinister chill. Upon appearing, the skeletal giant immediately raised its axe and charged at Ling Han. At the same time, the armor on its body started to glow, surprisingly forming streaks of divine patterns. This skeletal giant appeared incredibly realistic. It's merely formed with sound waves, so why does it feel so real? However, Ling Han was unfazed, and he met the skeletal giant's attack with his fist. Pang! His fist collided with the skeletal giant's axe, releasing a devastating shock wave that instantly surged into the surroundings, crushing the land and causing a huge amount of damage. However, this was a stretch of desolate land to begin with, so it mattered little how much they damaged the surroundings. What was astonishing was that the skeletal giant was actually able to block Ling Han's attack. Ling Han hadn't expected this. The skeletal giant was merely formed from sound waves, so how could it possess such powerful might? As expected of a king tier, their abilities sure are astonishing. Ling Han laughed loudly as he continued to exchange blows with the skeletal giant. Streaks of divine patterns appeared on his fist and arm, and his battle prowess instantly surged to another level. He threw several more punches, and the skeletal giant was finally shattered into pieces. However, Faceless simply plucked his chin a few more times. Another skeletal giant materialized and charged at Ling Han. Again? Ling Han shook his head. He couldn't stay passive and allow Faceless to attack him at will. He activated the star-plucking step, escaping from the skeletal giant at a blinding speed before dashing at Faceless. Faceless was slightly surprised. He hadn't expected Ling Han to possess such tremendous speed. However, this didn't faze him. He extended his arm, and surprisingly drew a thin sword from his chin. He immediately thrust the sword at Ling Han. He had hidden a sword in his chin and caught Ling Han completely off guard. Ling Han had no time to adjust his attack, so he immediately took a deep breath before exhaling forcefully. Hoo! He instantly floated back like a falling leaf. Shwa! Faceless thin sword swept past the tip of Ling Han's nose. If it were an inch closer, it would have sliced Ling Han's nose clean off. Even if it hadn't sliced his nose off, it would have still drawn blood. Meanwhile, the skeletal giant had already arrived behind Ling Han. It viciously swung its axe at his back. Faceless naturally wouldn't let this opportunity slip, and he immediately charged at Ling Han from the front. This placed immense pressure on Ling Han. Pang pang pang. Faceless and the skeletal giant launched a flurry of attacks at Ling Han, one from in front and one from behind. Just as I expected, he's incredibly powerful, Ling Han exclaimed in his mind. This was the first time he had become so disheveled in a battle against someone at the same cultivation level. However, although they said this was a battle at the same cultivation level, Faceless was actually one sub-minor level above him. Moreover, Faceless had only suppressed his power. His grasp and application of regulations were still at the pinnacle level. Thus, there was still a gap between their abilities, a relatively big one at that. However, did fair battles truly exist in the world? If one possessed weaker cultivation than their opponent, who dictated that their opponent had to suppress their cultivation level? Faceless was already being extremely generous by suppressing his cultivation level. Ling Han naturally wouldn't complain, either. However, since his opponent had drawn a weapon, he also wouldn't hold back anymore. He roared as he unsheathed his divine demon sword. Murderous aura instantly soared into the sky. The divine demon sword had elevated in quality and become a level 6 god tool, and thus its might had naturally soared to a new height. A wisp of heaven's might also flowed through it, and this more so induced fear into one's heart. Ling Han swung the sword. Pooh! The skeletal giant was instantly sliced into 2 halves. Sword's might coursed through it, and the 2 halves of its body violently exploded into pieces. It was unable to withstand even a single attack. Brilliant sword! Faceless didn't forget to praise the divine demon sword as he slashed his own sword at Ling Han. Ding! Their swords collided, releasing a dazzling divine light. Faceless sword was a level 8 god tool, yet it was completely unable to suppress Ling Han's divine demon sword. Faceless had nurtured his sword himself, and thus it contained his martial intent. Coupled with its 2-level advantage, its might wasn't weaker than that of the divine demon sword. However, it was still unable to gain an advantage. Ling Han's level 6 divine sword was just as powerful as Faceless level 8 divine sword. This was simply incredible. It was no wonder that Faceless was interested in the divine demon sword. Boom! 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 Faceless was definitely one of the most powerful king tiers of the younger generation. His battle prowess was absolutely terrifying. He had grasped higher-level regulations of heaven and earth than Ling Han, while Ling Han had a freakish physique and recovery ability. Thus, the former possessed a stronger offensive ability, while the latter possessed a stronger defensive ability. As a result, neither of them could gain the upper hand. However, if this battle continued, Ling Han would definitely emerge the final victor. This was because his defensive ability was passive and something that would remain forever. Meanwhile, Faceless would be wounded if he lost concentration and accidentally allowed Ling Han to strike him. Ha ha ha! Faceless laughed loudly and pulled out of the battle. I can't defeat you if we battle at the same cultivation level. I can't defeat you either, Ling Han said. If we genuinely battle at the same cultivation level, you'll definitely defeat me, Faceless said. After all, I can only suppress my power. My grasp of regulations is still far stronger than yours. Faceless was completely honest about this. However, he paused for a moment before continuing. We were only sparring just now. If that were a life-and-death battle, it's hard to say who would have killed whom. Ling Han nodded in agreement. Could prodigies like them not have trump cards? For example, he still hadn't activated Heaven's Might yet. Moreover, even if he were severely wounded, he could still circulate a drop of indestructible true fluid and instantly recover. In fact, he even had a 1% chance of rising from the ashes. Of course, his strongest trump card was still the Black Tower. If worse came to worst, he could simply hide in the Black Tower. If he did so, even saints wouldn't be able to do anything. The two of them felt like they were old friends, even though this was the first time they had met. They decided to sit down and discuss Tao. Although Faceless possessed a higher cultivation level, Ling Han's thinking was fresh and bold. It gave him quite a lot of inspiration. Meanwhile, Ling Han also received a lot of inspiration. The reason for this was simple. Faceless possessed a higher cultivation level than him. The two of them became more and more enthusiastic, and they ended up speaking for an entire 3 days. However, they still felt unsatiated. They felt as if they could discuss Tao for another 7 or 8 days. Hey, I finally found you. A voice that was dripping with hatred suddenly traveled over. Ling Han and Faceless looked over, only to see Xie Donglai walking over with his 2 elderly servants behind him. There was also a middle-aged woman. Zhu Liyun, that also known as Will-o'-the-Wisp. Chapter 1272 Arrival of Pursuing Troops. Killing intent flashed across Ling Han's eyes. This woman was truly selfish. After being rejected, she had chosen to push everyone else into extreme danger. He had never seen such a disgusting woman before. Moreover, did she genuinely like him? No, she was simply attracted by his identity of a level 8 alchemist. Although she only believed that he was a level 4 or level 5 alchemist. It was rare for Ling Han to feel killing intent toward a stranger. However, this woman had succeeded in triggering his killing intent. With regard to this, she was quite special. A cold smile appeared on Xie Donglai's face. He nodded at Zhu Liyun and said, "He's indeed here." Zhu Liyun hurriedly put on an obsequious smile, and said, "After seeing this person visit the B*TCH, I returned to Wolfang City to gather more information. Only then did I discover that he had headed in this direction. Thankfully, I completed the task that young Master Xie gave me." In fact, they had already scoured the two-realm battlefield for a long time. However, Ling Han had been cultivating in seclusion in the Black Tower, so how could they have found him? If it weren't for Xie Donglai's pettiness and overwhelming desire to exact revenge on Ling Han, they would have given up a long time ago. Trying to find someone in this place even with a general direction was like trying to find a needle in a haystack. Xie Donglai stared at Ling Han coldly, and said, "Ling Han, so it turns out that you're that B*TCH's lover. No wonder I thought your name sounded a bit familiar." Killing intent flashed through his eyes. He finally understood why Ling Han had opposed him the entire time. As it turned out, it was because of his relationship with the heavenly Phoenix Maiden. However, he was like a mantis trying to stop a chariot. So what if he was a level 8 alchemist? If he killed everyone here, who would suspect him of being the killer? In fact, what did it matter if they suspected him? They would need evidence to convict him. Without evidence, who would dare to use force against a descendant of an Eternal River tier elite? Ling Han turned to Faceless and said, "Brother Faceless, can you hold those 3 men back for me? I want to kill that woman." Faceless didn't ask any questions, instead saying, "Are you sure you can defeat that woman? Although her strength is only so, her cultivation level is far higher than yours." He could clearly determine that Ling Han's battle prowess hadn't reached the consummate level of the Sun-Moon tier yet. Ling Han flashed a confident smile, and replied, "I'm positive." Faceless nodded and said, "Fine, I'll deal with those 3 men then." He appeared especially at ease. This was extremely normal. He was at the pinnacle level of the Sun-Moon tier, and it was possible that he had already reached the peak stage. Meanwhile, Xie Donglai and his 2 elder servants were only at the consummate level of the Sun-Moon tier. For them, fighting against a pinnacle-level elite would be like fighting against a heavenly body tier elite. Their advantage in numbers would be completely useless. At least, the 3 of them would stand no chance against Faceless. Perhaps they would need 10, 100, or even 1,000 cultivators to team up against him. The exact number would depend on Faceless' accomplishment at the pinnacle level. Whether he was at the early stage, middle stage, late stage, or peak stage would make a huge difference. Ling Han had full confidence in Faceless' ability. Thus, he was extremely relaxed as he strode toward Zhu Liyun. He was going to kill this toxic woman first. Otherwise, he would be leaving a poisonous snake by the heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden's side. "You two are far too arrogant," Xie Donglai shouted. He had naturally heard Ling Han's conversation with Faceless, and it had caused him to almost explode in anger. The 2 of them were measly cultivators at the medium extreme, yet one of them dared to claim that he would fight against 3 of them, while the other claimed that he would kill Zhu Liyun. Where was their confidence coming from? Where was their courage coming from? Would they die if they didn't make such bold claims? He had nothing but scorn for Ling Han and Faceless upon detecting that the aura from their bodies was only at the medium extreme of the Sun-Moon tier. Gasp! However, this thought had barely left Xie Donglai's mind when he immediately sucked in a cold breath. How long has passed? Yet Ling Han has already advanced another level? Had he already been stuck at the peak stage of the low extreme for a long time? And he coincidentally broke through at this time? If this were the case, he could still accept it. Otherwise, wouldn't this brat be a supreme freak? One had to remember the Purple Moon Divine Maiden's claim that Ling Han's true age was definitely under 50. This was the claim of an Eternal River tier elite. Who dared to question it? He's reached the medium extreme of the Sun-Moon tier before 50. Killing intent surged from Xie Donglai's body. He definitely couldn't spare this love rival. He was far too fucking freakish. "Kill him," he shouted softly. He naturally didn't need to deal with Ling Han himself. His 2 elderly servants would dispose of Ling Han for him. "Understood, young master." The 2 elderly servants immediately charged at Ling Han. "Ha, I'll play with you too." Faceless dashed over to meet them. "Why are you hiding your appearance? Can you not show your face to others?" Xie Donglai mocked. Surprisingly, His insults had improved significantly after his several verbal skirmishes with Ling Han. He was far more toxic than before. Faceless expression couldn't be seen. However, he replied with a stroke of his chin. Wang! A sword instantly materialized in the air and slashed at Xie Donglai. By the looks of it, he had been angered slightly. You dare! The two elderly servants exchanged a glance. Then one of them charged toward Faceless, and the other charged toward Ling Han. Wang! Faceless stroked his chin again, and a spear materialized in the air and shot at the elderly servant who was charging toward Ling Han. Pang! The elderly servant simply threw a punch backward and shattered the spear to pieces. Meanwhile, the other elderly servant had already appeared before Faceless. Pang! He launched a strike and sent Faceless flying backward. Faceless twisted in the air before landing on the ground. He coughed upon landing, and a splotch of blood instantly appeared on his face veil. He suddenly came to a realization, and exclaimed, "Oh! I forgot to undo the suppression on my cultivation." Ling Han's expression involuntarily darkened. He hadn't expected Faceless to have such a foolish side to him. If he were killed because of such a mistake, wouldn't that be incredibly sad? Pang! He hurriedly threw a punch as these thoughts flashed through his mind. His fist collided with the elderly servant's, and he instantly slid backward. His power was far below that of the elderly servant. However, because of his powerful physique, he was able to absorb the power of the elderly servant's strike after dragging a 300-meter-long ditch along the ground. Ling Han shook his hands. His godly bones were numb due to the formidable power of the collision, and the skin on his hands had also cracked open, allowing blood to seep out. Brother Faceless, don't screw us over. It was an accident, Faceless hurriedly said. Childish games. Xie Donglai chuckled coldly and shouted, hurry up and kill them. Ling Han's rapid advance in cultivation terrified him. At his current speed, it was possible that he would reach the peak stage of the Sun-Moon tier within 100 years. In fact, he could break through to the Heavenly Body tier within 1,000 years. This was inhumane. The two elderly servants continued to attack Ling Han and Faceless. I said I would play with both of you, Faceless said with a smile. He charged forward, and his aura instantly increased explosively. Pang! He appeared before Ling Han in a flash, and he immediately pressed his palm toward one of the elderly servants. A devastating power swept over and instantly sent the elderly servant flying. His trajectory just so happened to intersect with the pursuing elderly servant, and they violently collided with each other. The two of them instantly tumbled along the ground. Pang 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 pang. They only came to a stop after tumbling an extremely long distance. This strike was earth-shattering, and it left Xie Donglai and the others stunned. What in the world is going on? An elite at the consummate level of the Sun-Moon tier had been sent flying by a single strike. Not only that, but he had even collided into another elite at the consummate level of the Sun-Moon tier and sent him tumbling along the ground. Fuck! Chapter 1273 Destroying Enemies. Faceless stood as firm and as upright as a mountain. His white clothes billowed gently, and an intense aura of smugness exuded from his body. However, he was indeed powerful. One could only act smug and show off if they were powerful. Otherwise, they would merely be making a fool of themselves. Astonishment finally spread across Xie Donglai's face. Faceless' aura had suddenly become profound and formidable, and it was as if he had become an untouchable god. How is this possible? He's clearly only at the medium extreme. So, how did he suddenly become so powerful? Mister, you are? Xie Donglai asked solemnly. He didn't dare to underestimate his opponent anymore. Faceless smiled faintly and said, You're not worthy of learning my name. Xie Donglai was instantly enraged. He wasn't worthy of learning his name? He was a descendant of great General Xie, and his background was more so an eternal river tier force. Yet, he wasn't worthy of learning his opponent's name. This person is even more arrogant than Ling Han. He's even more detestable. Die, he roared. He had suppressed his anger for far too long in Wolffang City. Before that, he had also been kicked out of the Purple Moon Army's territory before even making it into their encampment. Right now, His pent-up anger was finally erupting. The two elderly servants retrieved their weapons as they crawled back up. They forcefully suppressed the astonishment in their minds. In the beginning, they had thought that Ling Han and Faceless were both at the medium extreme of the Sun-Moon tier. Thus, they had naturally felt that it beneath them to use God tools. Now, however, Faceless had suddenly transformed into a formidable elite. As such, they naturally couldn't maintain the same level of composure anymore. "Brother Faceless, I'll leave them to you," Ling Han said with a smile. "No problem," Faceless replied calmly. He appeared especially relaxed. In fact, this was exactly how he felt at this moment. He was at the pinnacle level of the Sun-Moon tier, after all, so he could crush Xie Donglai and his two elderly servants with a simple wave of his hand. "Faceless?" Xie Donglai had naturally heard Ling Han's exchanges with Faceless. However, he didn't believe that Faceless was genuinely his name. It was because of this that he had asked Faceless for his name. However, he had ended up being slapped across the face instead. "Damn it! Damn it! Damn it!" Meanwhile, the two elderly servants charged at Faceless together. To his surprise, they actually possessed a combination attack formation. Their steps were like yin and yang, one high, one low, one above, and one below. The power of their attacks stacked together, and its might was genuinely impressive. Faceless strummed his chin. Wang! A sound wave burst out and transformed into a spear that swept toward the two elders. Pang! The two elders were no match for this spear, and they were both sent flying by its formidable might. This! Xie Donglai trembled lightly. The combined attack of his two elderly servants was extremely powerful. When they teamed up, even he would struggle to defeat them. However, Faceless had defeated them with a simple strum of his chin. "Sun-Moon tier. Pinnacle level," he said with a quiver in his voice. Apart from this, he couldn't think of any other possibilities. Faceless seemed indifferent, and he said, "My job is to hold you people back and have you watch on obediently. I suggest that you cooperate with me and don't make me waste my strength. I despise people who trouble me unnecessarily. When it comes to such people, I have a habit of directly killing them. Understood?" Xie Donglai wore an ugly expression. He was the descendant of an eternal river tier elite, yet he was actually being threatened like this. How could he accept this? However, Faceless had already made himself very clear. If they continued to resist, he would directly kill them. He didn't doubt Faceless' killing intent one bit. People like him looked especially gentle and amiable, but when they started to kill people, they would become shockingly ruthless. Xie Donglai and his two elderly servants didn't dare to move. However, they had the background of Great General Xie, and they also had some life-saving trump cards up their sleeves. Thus, they still had a chance to escape even if Ling Han and Faceless tried to kill them and destroy the evidence of their actions. Xie Donglai's mind whirred as he stood watching the scenes before him. He wanted to invite this supreme prodigy to his side. If he could make Faceless his subordinate, his standing in the Xie clan would definitely elevate to another level. This wasn't impossible. After all, Faceless still didn't know his true identity yet. Heh, so what if you're a supreme prodigy? Can you pass the barrier of the eternal river tier? "Brother Faceless, I'm Xie." Pooh! A burst of sword chi slashed over just as Xie Donglai started to speak. The sword chi struck his mouth and instantly shattered several of his teeth. His words were naturally stuffed back into his mouth. "If you utter any more nonsense, broken teeth will be the least of your worries," Faceless said coldly. Xie Donglai was as embarrassed as he was infuriated. Since when had he ever been humiliated like this before? However, he didn't dare to voice his anger. Instead, he glared at Faceless, and promised himself that he would exact revenge in the future. He would advance to the heavenly body tier as quickly as he could and use his advantage in cultivation level to suppress him. In any case, he genuinely didn't dare to speak anymore. Meanwhile, Ling Han stood opposite to Zhu Liyun. "You want to kill me?" Zhu Liyun asked in scorn. She admitted that Ling Han was a supreme prodigy in alchemy. However, when it came to cultivation, he was only at the low extreme. Fuck, wait. He was already at the medium extreme. Zhu Liyun was stunned. Ling Han had only been at the middle stage of the low extreme when she had first met him. Only a few months had passed, yet he had already advanced to the medium extreme? This was utterly terrifying. Were alchemists all this freakish? I don't want to kill you. I'll definitely kill you, Ling Han said gravely. He absolutely abhorred dishonest and disloyal people like her. Humph. So what if you've advanced rapidly? You're still an entire 2 minor levels below me. This is an insurmountable gulf. There was a cold sneer on Zhu Liyun's face. If Faceless were her opponent, she would definitely wet herself in fright. However, Ling Han? Heh. Is that so? Ling Han retrieved his divine demon sword. He would kill this person with his full power. Zhu Liyun also retrieved her god tool. She wouldn't relax and become careless just because her opponent's cultivation level was below hers. Conceit was a bad habit of men. In order to achieve her goals, she would go all out and use any method possible. In any case, this was a battle of life and death, so she would obviously use her full strength. As the saying went, a lion would use its full strength even when wrestling a rabbit. Ling Han didn't speak any more nonsense. Facing this kind of vile woman, there was only one thing he needed to kill her. He lashed out with his divine demon sword, which emitted a boundless divine light and bursts of devastating sword chi. The sword chi was like soaring dragons and crackling lightning. Its might was simply formidable. A look of greed appeared in Xie Donglai's eyes when he saw this. This was an incredibly powerful sword. In fact, even he could sense a shred of its might. If he could obtain this sword, perhaps his battle prowess would elevate by a noticeable amount. However, a ruthless killer was standing right in front of him, so how would he dare to move? Anyhow, Zhu Liyun was no pushover, either. This was mainly because she enjoyed a significant advantage in terms of cultivation level. This wasn't something that could be overcome with a god tool. She wielded a saber, and her strikes were bold and ferocious. Like an angry shrew shouting on the streets, her aura was vicious to the extreme. After a few exchanges, Ling Han was instantly pushed to his back foot. No one found this strange. After all, there were a whopping 11 stars between their cultivation levels. Even if Ling Han were a 10-star genius, he could only grit his teeth and accept defeat. In any case, it was impossible to become a 10-star genius unless one advanced to the pinnacle level. However, if Ling Han were at the pinnacle level, he would already possess the ability to suppress cultivators at the consummate level. Thus, this was an impossible cycle. However, Ling Han had never planned to fight a long and drawn-out battle, and he had never planned to tire his opponent to death using his freakish physique and recovery ability. Instead, he directly retrieved the misty soul-capturing flower. Zhu Liyun's eyes instantly glazed over when she saw this flower. Then, fervent excitement appeared on her face. Pooh! Sword light slashed over, and a head flew into the air. A fountain of blood sprayed into the sky. Chapter 1274 Heavenly Tribulation of the Old Ginseng. Ling Han sheathed his sword. Pang! Zhu Liyun's headless corpse collapsed to the ground in a heap. Meanwhile, her head also fell back down from the sky. However, she still wore an intoxicated expression, and it was as if she hadn't noticed the arrival of her death. Shock spread across Xie Donglai's face. Just then, he had almost been intoxicated by the misty soul-capturing flower as well. Fortunately, he had been far away enough, and he had also tempered his divine sense before. As such, his willpower was strong, and it wouldn't be that easy for him to fall victim. However, it was a completely different story for his 2 elderly servants. They were still confused at this moment, and it was as if they had even forgotten their own identity. What a terrifying demonic flower! However, Faceless was completely unaffected. He was simply curious, and he asked, "Brother Ling, is this the misty soul-capturing flower?" "As expected of Brother Faceless," Ling Han said with a smile. "This is indeed the misty soul-capturing flower." He held the misty soul-capturing flower in his left hand while he held his divine demon sword in his right. He strode towards Xie Donglai. Xie Donglai's expression changed drastically. He gritted his teeth, and a golden paper seal instantly appeared in his hand. He slapped this seal onto his chest, and a powerful golden light immediately burst into the surroundings, causing Ling Han and Faceless to involuntarily turn their heads away. This light was far too blinding. In fact, it was genuinely capable of ruining one's eyes. When they turned back around, That orb of golden light had already enveloped Xie Donglai, as well as his 2 elderly servants, and soared into the sky. In the immortal realm, only heavenly body tier elites could grasp the more profound regulations of heaven and earth and achieve the ability of flight. However, the regulations were extremely chaotic in the 2-realm battlefield, so it would be even harder to maintain flight for long periods of time. Yet, the speed of the golden orb that enveloped Xie Donglai and his 2 elderly servants was incredibly quick. It was evident that this divine seal wasn't the work of a heavenly body tier elite. There was an eternal river tier in the Xie clan, so it was only normal that he refined some divine seals for his descendants. However, the Xie clan had so many members, and there was no way that an eternal river tier elite would spend all his time refining divine seals. Thus, these divine seals were probably still tremendously valuable in the Xie clan. Thus, Xie Donglai probably only had one such divine seal, even with his lofty standing. Such a divine seal was genuinely a lifesaver. Xie Donglai was afraid that Ling would target him with the misty soul-capturing flower, and he was even more afraid that Faceless would suddenly attack him. The latter would truly plunge him into a perilous situation. To him, facing a cultivator at the pinnacle level of the Sun-Moon tier would be no different from facing an elite at the heavenly body tier. In both cases, he would be absolutely no match for them. Ling shook his head as he put his divine demon sword and misty soul-capturing flower away. In reality, the effectiveness of the misty soul-capturing flower was fairly limited. At least, it was completely useless against Faceless. It was clear that the stronger one's willpower, the stronger their resistance against the misty soul-capturing flower's intoxication ability. Faceless wasn't a nosy person, and he didn't ask Ling about his animosity towards Xie Donglai and Zhu Liyun. Instead, he continued to discuss Dao with him. Another 7 days passed, and only then did he reluctantly bid farewell to Ling. Their discussions of Dao had benefited him immensely, and also given him a wealth of inspiration. Thus, he decided to enter seclusion for a few months or even 1 or 2 years so that he could work toward the peak stage of the pinnacle level. Ling also entered the Black Tower. 3 months had already passed, and he could temper his body in the immortal flames again. People often said that things were difficult the first time but easy the second. However, after tempering his body in the immortal flames 2 times, Ling was only left with memories of pain and suffering. If it were possible, he truly didn't want to be burned to ash again. However, in order to become stronger, he resolutely leaped into the cauldron again. 3 days passed, and Ling crawled out of the cauldron. Like before, he had transformed into a tiny infant. However, if one looked closely, they would discover that he was at least 7 months old this time. This was already a huge improvement from the first time, when he was at most 3 months old. This represented his improved understanding of the indestructible Heaven Scroll, especially the part that pertained rising from the ashes. If I'm killed, I've almost got a 2% chance of rising from the ashes and returning to my peak power now, Ling murmured to himself. However, this number was still too low. Out of 50 deaths, he would only be able to revive once. Such a probability was unacceptably low. However, I can ingest berserk blood spirit pills again. Rising from the ashes would help his physique become stronger. However, this effect would only start to slowly become obvious with time. Meanwhile, the effects of berserk blood spirit pills were extremely evident. Once he took and digested one, his cultivation level would immediately advance by 1 sub-minor level. Ling sat under the reincarnation tree for 3 days, digesting a berserk blood spirit pill and also comprehending Dao. He had already advanced to the middle stage of the medium extreme, but his comprehension of this cultivation level was still lacking slightly. After all, he had only comprehended Dao for 3 years. The higher one's cultivation level, the harder it would be to comprehend the Dao of heaven and earth. He cultivated in seclusion for a few more days in order to stabilize his cultivation level. Only then did he return to Wolffang City. Several months had passed, and he needed to visit the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden. They had finally reunited after 10,000 years, yet they had only seen each other a limited number of times. Both he and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden missed each other immensely. He went to the Purple Moon Army, and had a lover's conversation with the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden. However, when he wanted to become more lovey-dovey, he was instantly swatted away by the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden. Sure enough, this savage lady hasn't changed a single bit. The heavenly phoenix divine maiden was easily embarrassed, and she had instinctively swatted him aside upon seeing him move in for a kiss. In the end, Ling Han wasn't able to realize his fantasy of kissing her. This savage lady. I'll punish you when I advance to the consummate level. Ling Han murmured to himself when he left the Purple Moon Army's encampment. Right now, he was genuinely no match for the heavenly phoenix divine maiden. Moreover, they obviously couldn't engage in a life-and-death battle. Thus, he was absolutely helpless in front of her. Oh, isn't this little Han? Why does it look like you've swallowed 100 flies? Rabbit and the old Ginseng appeared before Ling Han, and immediately started to tease him. A menacing look appeared on Ling Han's face, and he threatened, "If you two don't shut up, I'll cook you into ginseng and rabbit meat soup." The rabbit and old Ginseng continued to joke and laugh, completely unafraid of Ling Han's threat. They had their arms around each other's shoulders, and they looked like a pair of delinquent friends. It was just that Rabbit would occasionally drool when glancing at the old Ginseng. It was entirely imaginable that one of them might disappear at any moment. Little Han, do you want Grandpa Ginseng to teach you a few techniques? I guarantee you'll be able to win over the heart of any woman, the old Ginseng said shamelessly. Ling Han chuckled in scorn. The old Ginseng's techniques most likely involved lying, cheating, deceiving, and kidnapping. The old Ginseng's expression suddenly became serious, and he said, "Oh, that's right. Grandpa Ginseng is about to break through to the Sun-Moon tier. So, I've especially come to ask you to become my guard." Ling Han shook his head upon hearing this. He had thought that they had finally discovered their conscience and come to visit him. As it turned out, they had only come looking for him because the old Ginseng needed to face heavenly tribulation. However, this was good news. He could take this opportunity to freeload some tribulation again. Fine, let's go. The three people found a relatively desolate area, and the old Ginseng immediately started to face his heavenly tribulation. He was extremely confident that he could pass the tribulation. However, his vitality would definitely fall drastically after going through heavenly tribulation. If he were targeted by someone at that time, after all, who wouldn't want to eat godly medicine? Although the immortal realm had rules stating that one could only target netherworld beings in the two-realm battlefield, who would know if someone secretly killed an ally outside of Wolffang City? The main problem was that heavenly tribulation would cause a huge commotion and attract the attention of many people in the surroundings. Boom! Thunder instantly rumbled across the sky as the old Ginseng stopped suppressing his cultivation level. Dark clouds converged above him. The old Ginseng started to face heavenly tribulation. Meanwhile, Ling Han actively jumped toward him to freeload his heavenly tribulation. He would take this opportunity to further comprehend heaven's might. This brat is truly a freak, Rabbit exclaimed as he ran far away. He didn't want to be swept up in heavenly tribulation. After all, only freaks like Ling Han would actively provoke tribulations. Chapter 1275 The Heaven's Sword Palace has come again. The dark clouds dispersed after half a day. The old Ginseng had successfully passed his heavenly tribulation. Although his battle prowess wasn't impressive, he possessed a remarkable vitality due to his identity as a wood spirit, one of the spirits of the 5 elements. Thus, although he had been riddled with wounds after passing the tribulation just then, portions of his body had already fully healed. He was still covered in wounds, but his aura was tens of thousands of times more powerful than before. The gulf between the consummate level of the mountain river tier and the low extreme of the sun-moon tier was like the gulf between heaven and earth. Old Ginseng has reached the sun-moon tier, so he's definitely more nutritious now, Rabbit said as he drooled. It looked like he wanted to hop over and devour the old Ginseng as if he were a carrot. This wasn't any ordinary godly medicine. This was a godly medicine that had developed intelligence, absorbed the spiritual chi of heaven and earth, and cultivated to become a Ginseng king. Thus, the old Ginseng was definitely numerous times more nutritious than ordinary level 5 godly medicine. Ha ha ha, what great luck! There's actually a Ginseng king facing its heavenly tribulation here. Spirits of the 5 elements are inherently favored by heaven and earth. Ginseng kings are more so brimming with life essence. If I ingest one, it will not only elevate my cultivation level, but even increase my lifespan by tens of thousands of years. There was long laughter, and 7 men appeared before them. They were all at the sun-moon tier, though their specific cultivation levels were quite uneven, ranging from the low extreme to the consummate level. Thus, their age also differed greatly. Some of them were middle-aged men who were brimming with energy, while some of them were old men who had completely white hair. However, the path of cultivation was extremely dependent on one's talent. As such, those who were old wouldn't necessarily possess a higher cultivation level, while those who were young wouldn't necessarily possess a lower cultivation level. Ling Han had just faced heavenly tribulation as well, and a smile involuntarily tugged at his mouth when he saw the 7 men. After having a chance encounter with members of the Heaven Sword Palace, he had learned to observe whether people had unique insignias on their clothes. The 7 men were clearly companions, so it was extremely likely that they were all members of the same force. After a quick glance, he immediately discovered the sword that was sewn onto their sleeves. What an incredible coincidence! It was the Heaven Sword Palace again. In fact, this coincidental encounter was completely understandable. The Heaven Sword Palace had lost an extremely valuable treasure map here, after all, and they had already sent a team of disciples to search for it. Since these people had gone missing, the Heaven Sword Palace naturally sent more people to search for the map. The 7 members of the Heaven Sword Palace naturally saw Ling Han and the others as well. However, they found this group of people incredibly strange. There was a human, a demonic beast, and a wood spirit. Ha! This human! One of the middle-aged men wore a strange expression as he looked at Ling Han. He felt that this person looked slightly familiar. Ancestor Lu, is there something strange about this person? Someone asked. The middle-aged man suddenly clapped his hands and exclaimed, Ling Han! Ling Han? The other 6 men were extremely confused. They had never heard of this name before. He's the criminal who opened the sky and brought the lower realm into the immortal realm. The middle-aged man spat through gritted teeth. Anger burned in his eyes. In the immortal realm, Sun-Moon tier forces were utterly insignificant. The 5 sects had only obtained the lower realm by chance, and they had all viewed this small world as a precious treasure. In fact, before Ling Han's feat, they had already farmed the lower realm for 1 million years. Their harvests had been bountiful, and they would obtain several realm pills every 10,000 years. These realm pills had allowed the 5 sects to raise numerous Sun-Moon tier elites. One would understand the significance of these realm pills once they compared the 5 sects to other Sun-Moon tier forces. Whether it was in terms of absolute number or percentage, the 5 sects all had far more Sun-Moon tier elites than other Sun-Moon tier forces. This was all thanks to the realm pills. However, following Ling Han's feat of opening the sky, their farm of realm pills had gone up in a puff. It had become a mere memory. This naturally caused the higher-ups of the 5 sects to loathe Ling Han. They viewed him as someone who had to be killed. The problem was, they had no idea where the lower realm had gone after it ascended into the immortal realm. As such, they naturally had no idea where Ling Han had gone, either. That being the case, regardless of how powerful they were, there was absolutely nothing they could do. Moreover, the refinement of realm pills was far too damaging to the harmony of heaven, so only the true higher-ups and those who were sent to the small world knew of this secret. Thus, most members of the 5 sects had no idea who Ling Han was. However, after Ling Han opened the sky, the 5 sects immediately listed him as their #1 enemy. They had commanded their disciples to gather information on his whereabouts, and it seemed like they were hell-bent on killing him, no matter where he had gone. Thus, killing intent instantly appeared on the remaining 6 people's faces when they heard that Ling Han was the person who had opened the sky. Ancestor Lu, are you sure? A white-haired elder asked. Although he looked old, his cultivation was only at the medium extreme of the Sun-Moon tier. However, his lifespan was shorter, so he naturally aged quicker. The others all nodded in agreement. How many years had it been since Ling Han opened the sky and arrived in the immortal realm? How could he have possibly reached the medium extreme of the Sun-Moon tier already? This was far too unbelievable. Had he perhaps ingested some supreme divine pill? I'm certain. It's definitely him, the middle-aged man said, his voice dripping with hate. He had seen Ling Han's divine sense before, and the aura of a cultivator's divine sense was incredibly hard to change. This middle-aged man was called Lu Shi, and he was an orphan who had been adopted and raised by the Heaven Sword Palace. He was the 10th infant to be adopted, so he was named Lu Shi. 3 million years had now passed, and he had already grown from a small orphan to a formidable pillar of the Heaven Sword Palace. What luck! We'll kill this brat today, Then obtain a Ginseng king while we're at it. The others said with a cold smile. Obtain your mom, the old Ginseng immediately shouted. You people are still 8 million years too young to eat your grandpa Ginseng. Little Han, beat them up for me. There's no need to go easy on them. If you kill them, I'll cover for you. However, he continued to retreat as he shouted this. Just look at his thin arms and thin legs. How would he dare to face so many elites head-on? Ling Han drew his sword and said, since we all know each other's identity, let's save the nonsensical talk. Come, let's battle. You're a mere ant, Lu Shi said in disdain. In the eyes of immortal realm elites, people from small worlds were naturally nothing more than ants. In fact, they were even lower than ants. If they didn't think this, how could they have ruthlessly refined the people of the lower realm into realm pills? Yet, an ant actually dared to challenge them right now. How impudent! The cultivation speed of this brat was indeed astounding. However, he was only at the medium extreme, so what did it matter even if he were a 5-star genius? Before the 7 of them, he most likely couldn't even withstand a single strike. Kill him, Lu Shi commanded. It was beneath him to deal with such an ant himself. Understood, the 6 people replied. They all charged at Ling Han. Meanwhile, Ling Han was itching to do battle. He had advanced to the middle stage of the medium extreme, and his battle prowess had soared to the peak stage of the high extreme. Add to that his divine demon sword, and his battle prowess was easily on par with that of elites at the early stage of the consummate level. Moreover, this was already discounting the suppressive ability of the heaven's might that he could unleash. In addition to all this, he still had a huge weapon in the misty soul-capturing flower. With Lu Shi standing back, the 6 others were like mere children before him. Ling Han swung his divine demon sword as he charged forward. Sword projections intertwined, and killing intent soared into the sky. Lu Shi's expression instantly changed. Almost everyone in the Heaven's Sword Palace used a sword as their weapon, and he was no different. He was also a sword-wielding elite. Thus, he couldn't help but feel deeply astonished upon seeing Ling Han's attack. He knew that he had severely underestimated Ling Han's strength. Hurry! Retreat! He shouted frantically. At the same time, he hurriedly dashed toward Ling Han. Lu Shi literally means Lu number 10. Chapter 1276 Tool and User Become One. Lu Shi wanted to stop Ling Han, but he was too late. How astonishing was Ling Han's speed when he was using the star-plucking step. As his sword swept part, millions of sword projections swept out. The whole space was filled with fierce flashes of sword chi. Ah! Terrible cries rang out. With that one blow, 5 of the 7 members of the Heaven's Sword Palace had fallen, and aside from Lu Shi, the last remaining person had also suffered a considerable injury. There was a very deep wound in his right ribs. Lu Shi's eyes couldn't help but widen. He was both furious and shocked. How could this brat's brat be so terrifying? This was definitely battle prowess on the level of the consummate level. Only slightly weaker than himself was in the middle stage of the consummate level, and had not reached the true peak stage of the Sun-Moon tier yet. It was enough that he was cultivating at such a rapid pace, but more importantly, his battle prowess was still so strong. Couldn't he allow others some way to survive? How could a lowly commoner that came from a small world possibly have such natural talent, fated opportunities, and good fortune? He couldn't understand it in the slightest. The only other living person was also covered with cold sweat. Presently, he was filled with lingering fear. If it were not for the fact that he'd reacted that slight bit faster just now, he would have probably shared the fate of his 5 companions that were lying on the ground, their corpses gradually becoming cooler. Little beast, what a cruel heart you have. Lu Shi felt like his heart was bleeding. How much did the sect have to sacrifice to nurture a Sun-Moon tier disciple? Especially when they were advancing from Mountain River tier to Sun-Moon tier. That had been achieved by diluting the effects of the realm pill and distributing it to these disciples. They could only concoct a few pills every 10,000 years, and they would have to be divided equally among the 5 sects as well. After distribution, each sect would only have a single pill. And from the moment Ling Han opened the sky, even this one pill was no longer insured. Though it was not discernible yet, the 5 sects would definitely begin going downhill. Every single Sun-Moon tier disciple was incredibly precious. Ling Han brandished the divine demon sword, the sword's blade like snow, without the slightest bit of blood on it. He coldly said, "What a joke! All of you are filled with killing intent towards me, and it is only allowed that you kill me and not the other way round?" Lu Shi naturally knew that he had spoken nonsense, but what else could he say in his rage? Of course, this was also because he was used to being in a lofty position. He automatically placed himself on a high spot, and reprimanded those he deemed below himself. "You have to use your blood to repay your debts." Lu Shi took in a deep breath. Though this young man was frighteningly young, his abilities were astonishing, and he had no choice but to be extremely cautious. He summoned his own god tool. It was a white jade tower, and only had 7 levels. The moment it appeared, it shone with astonishing light. It was as if he had plucked a sun out of the skies. It was incredibly blinding. Ling Han was surprised. He channeled the Eye of Truth, and saw it very clearly. "This tower of yours contains one of your suns and moons." He had heard of the practice of using one's own self to refine the tool, but directly fusing one's sun and moon into his god tool? This was the first time he had seen something like that. Involuntarily, he became greatly interested. Was this user and tool becoming as one? "Destroy this tower." Meanwhile, Small Tower transmitted a message through divine sense into his mind. It could not bear to see any tower-shaped precious tools. The moment it saw one, it would become angered. Ling Han naturally ignored it, and said, "Then I would really like to take a look." "You will," Lu Shi said. "And the price will be your life." He summoned the precious tower, which cast shadow over Ling Han. Wang, the precious tower shone, multiple rays of light descending downwards. Every ray of light was like a fiery flame, filled with a frightening destructive ability, causing even the air itself to begin burning as crackling sounds rang out. Lu Shi cultivated fire techniques, so his sun and moon was also like fiery flames. Now that they had been fused into the precious tool, lending on the might of the god tool, its might was also completely expressed. Ling Han nodded internally. From a certain aspect, the combination of user and tool was really a kind of grand move. Its might was indeed very, very powerful. However, the disadvantage was also very obvious. This sun and moon had really been severed, so it would naturally affect himself, and he was destined to be incapable of reaching a higher cultivation level. However, though it was not all the people of the 5 sects, at least 99% of them could not possibly break through to the heavenly body tier, so why would they have to mind? What they pursued was strength on the level of sun-moon tier. Still, though user and tool becoming one was powerful, could it compare to the divine demon sword? Ling Han sliced out towards the skies. Though it was merely one strike, the divine demon sword showed its might, and once again sent out millions of sword projections, boosting the might of this attack by who knew how many times. Pu. The fiery light was slashed apart, and sword chi danced unhindered, just like a ruler descending onto his territory. Humph! Lu Shi also knew that he could not possibly suppress Ling Han by merely depending on a precious tower. His body shot out, and a cold light swept past. There was a sword in his hand, and it stabbed out towards Ling Han. This sword was similarly burning with soaring fierce flames, its brightness blinding to the eye. Ling Han was shocked. This sword had shockingly also fused with a sun and moon. This guy wouldn't have fused all 4 of his suns and moons into god tools, would he? "Is there any more?" Ling Han asked with a smile. As he wielded his sword to parry his attacks, he was also very curious at the same time. "As you wish." Lu Shi smirked coldly. Wang, he summoned another divine sword, wielding the 2 swords in both hands. Meanwhile, the precious tower moved automatically, sending down divine flames onto Ling Han, planning to refine him by force. This second sword had similarly fused with a sun and moon. Going by that account, his 3 suns and moons had been used for tool refinement, and he had not formed the 4th moon. Otherwise, he might summon a 4th god tool. Ordinarily, it was not that the more god tools there were, the better it was. That was because a cultivator had limited energy, and could not possibly allow all the god tools to show their might completely, so he might as well concentrate fully on controlling one. However, these 3 god tools of Lu Shi's had fused with a sun and moon from him. This was completely different. It was as if the god tools had become a part of his body. He needed only split up a little of his concentration to control them, and all the three god tools would be able to show their complete might. True enough, small sects would have their own strengths. They did not have the technique to break through to the heavenly body tier, so they used all means available to them to become stronger in the sun-moon tier. Combining themselves with their tools, and controlling 3 or even 4 god tools all at once, was indeed a very good method. Though his own battle prowess would definitely be affected, he would have the might of another 2 god tools, so he could completely compensate for his shortcoming in this manner. Lu Shi charged over, his hands holding a divine sword each. Endless flames danced. Ling Han stood solemnly, and in that instant when the other approached, he suddenly shot out the 7-kill subduing soul technique. Like an angry arrow, it shot towards Lu Shi. Woo! Even if Lu Shi had already cultivated for several million years, and had nurtured his spirit to a very strong extent, he still grunted at this blow. He felt so much agony he almost used his hands to hold onto his head. He knew that things were not good, and hurriedly stimulated the divine tower to protect him. The 7-floor treasured tower instantly enlarged many times, and descended down on his head, protecting him within it. Ding! True enough, when Ling Han's slash reached, it sliced into the treasured tower, causing the body of the tower to shake madly. A few pieces of scrap metal had even been sliced off, but this blow was still blocked in the end. After all, he was an old monster that had lived for more than 3 million years, so his battle experience was really too bountiful. Ling Han did not strike further. Instead, he focused on the remaining person from the Heaven Sword Palace. Chapter 1277 Identity Really Revealed. Lu Shi was guarded by the precious tower, and Ling Han wouldn't be able to slice through it in the short term, so there was naturally no need for him to waste time. Do you have some strange, bizarre god tools? Ling Han sized up the other person from the Heaven Sword Palace curiously. The man was already scared out of his wits. He had initially thought that with Lu Shi, they would be able to easily take Ling Han down, but the result was far, far out of his expectations. Lu Shi was actually forced so far by Ling Han that he could only protect himself, and he had now become Ling Han's target instead. In this moment, his cold sweat dripped like rain. He felt that his legs were weak, and as if he couldn't even stand steady anymore. The combining of user and tool was a secret technique that belonged exclusively to the consummate level of the Sun-Moon tier. Only after they had broken through to this cultivation level would they be taught the technique by the sect. Thus, he could not produce any powerful god tool. Even if he could, his cultivation level was still too low. What qualified him to stand against Ling Han? You dare! Lu Shi's voice rang out from within the previous tower. 2 divine swords shot out of his hands, slicing out towards Ling Han. Ling Han brandished his own sword to parry, and shot out multiple flashes of sword chi, completely dispersing Lu Shi's attack. However, the other person from the Heaven Sword Palace also took advantage of the opening to flee. He was really scared out of his wits, his legs flying madly. He only hated the fact that he did not have a few more legs, and could not flee fast enough. Can you flee? Ling Han shook his head. He used the annihilating dragon star arrow. Xiao, an arrow swept out quickly like a flash of light, and soon caught up to that person. Pooh! The arrow had pierced through the man's chest, forcibly tearing that person into 2. However, the vitality of Sun-Moon tier cultivators was really too strong. They would not die even if their bodies had been separated in half. The hands crawled, the legs jumped, and the 2 halves of the body would join back into one. Connected with origin power, and nurtured for a few years, who knew, maybe they would be a new man again. So troublesome. Ling Han drew the bow once more. Don't even think about it. Lu Shi roared. He stimulated the precious tower to cast a shadow over Ling Han. Ling Han changed the direction of the arrow, and shot out at Lu Shi. Xiao, the arrow of origin power was so fast that even elites of the Sun-Moon tier would find it difficult to grasp its course. Pooh! This arrow shot into Lu Shi's left shoulder. If it were not for the fact that he managed to dodge a bit in the nick of time, this arrow definitely would have penetrated his heart. Then, even if he had not died, he would have been severely wounded. Lu Shi paled in shock. How could this arrow be so fast? Moreover, it was so powerful that even his defensive origin power could not block the attack. Though he still had a great many ultimate techniques he had yet to use, he had now lost all of his fighting spirit. This young man made him feel a pressure as if there was no way for him to oppose him. He had a feeling of foreboding in his heart, and that was even if the strongest elites of the sect moved, they might not be able to take this young man down. However, even if one could not, then what about 2 or 3? Even if they were immortals, their power was limited. Once that limit had been exceeded, then they would still die, no matter how strong they were. He had already decided. He would immediately make a report about Ling Han having arrived to the Cloud Apex planet, and send out the Heaven Sword Palaces. No, send out all the elites of the 5 sects to besiege Ling Han and kill him. Otherwise, with the freakish pace of improvement that this brat had, it probably wouldn't take as much as a few years, and he would be on equal levels with the 5 sects. By then, it would be eternally impossible for them to suppress the latter. He was also a decisive person. Immediately, he gritted his teeth, turned around, and left. The precious tower spun lightly, sending down multiple streaks of flames, and forming a powerful shield for him. Ancestor Lu! Ancestor Lu! The remaining person from the Heaven Sword Palace called out desperately. He had forcefully joined his body back together, but he should be given at least 15 minutes time to recover. Only then would he be able to forcibly use his origin power to piece his body back together again and recover his ability to move. But now that Lu Shi had abandoned him, this meant that he would be absolutely alone without any help. Haha, and you guys wanted to eat Grandpa Ginseng, just eat my precious ginseng foot. The old ginseng was beginning to act up again. The powerful enemy had fled, and the only one left behind was close to dying. Naturally, he was now fearless, and rushed up to deliver a series of kicks. That person was in the high extreme of the Sun-Moon tier. In his prime condition, he could suppress the old ginseng single-handedly, but now, he could only be kicked madly by the old ginseng. Only a few kicks later, he was already pouring out blood like mad as he had been directly kicked to death by the old ginseng. Fuck. Grandpa Ginseng is too awesome. Just broke through to the Sun-Moon tier, and I have already killed a powerful enemy in the consummate level. The old ginseng was very confident in himself. I have to celebrate this with 100-year-old undergarment. Indeed, he drew out a pink undergarment, and breathed in heavily. His expression intoxicated. Pervert. Ling Han and Rabbit shot out a foot at the same time, sending the old ginseng flying. However, Lu Shi had fled. Ling Han thought for a moment, and then gave up the idea of chasing after him. That precious tower god tool of his had very strong defenses, and even if he used the divine demon sword, he would need a very long period of time to penetrate through it. However, Lu Shi was not about to stay there and wait for him to break through the defenses. This place was not too far off from Wolfang City, after all. This is good too. I'll pull the snake from its hole, and have them come besiege me. I'll take advantage of the chance to kill a few more, Ling Han thought. It still had yet to be determined who was the hunter and who was the prey. At present, my abilities would advancing by leaps and bounds every 3 months. In another half a year, I will truly be confident that I will be able to kill even those at the peak stage of the consummate level with my sword. If he now stood against the consummate level of the Sun-Moon tier, he could only depend on the misty soul-capturing flower to restrain them. But as his cultivation level became higher and higher, then he could kill his enemies with his own power. This also corresponded with Ling Han's Tao, and that was pursuing his own personal strength. I'll switch to another place. Who knows, I may be able to pick up a few realm spirit stones. I have come by opening the sky, so I have been boosted with a good fortune from the heaven and earth. My luck is much better than any other person's. To Ling Han, the origin power that he had accumulated from cultivation could not possibly compare to taking the berserk blood spirit pills. Thus, this was purely a waste of time. He would simply concoct some alchemical pills, then roam around in the spacious 2-realm battlefield, kill a few beings of the netherworld to earn merit points, and see if he could pick up a few realm spirit stones while he was at it. His luck was really quite good. He actually managed to pick up a few realm spirit stones, but they were only the size of his little finger. Their value could not even compare to 1% of the value of that large realm spirit stone. There will be a time when I finish my luck, he murmured ruefully. On the other side, after Lu Shi went back to Wolfang City, he gathered the people from the Heaven Sword Palace to prevent them from encountering Ling Han and then being eliminated one by one. He communicated with the Heaven Sword Palace at the same time to report the matter of Ling Han. He stressed many times that they could not underestimate Ling Han just because he had come from a small world and had only cultivated for a few decades. This enemy. They had to use their full efforts to deal with him. Otherwise, if he was allowed to mature and grow, he would become a calamity to the Heaven Sword Palace. After receiving this report, a fierce debate first rose up in the Heaven Sword sect. One portion expressed their agreement with Lu Shi's opinion, and wanted to join up with the other 5 sects to hunt Ling Han down together. There was another portion though that thought Lu Shi had exaggerated the matter. Not even 10 years had passed since Ling Han opened the sky until now, and he already possessed enough power to become a threat to the 5 sects. What a joke! 10 years' time was not even enough time for an immortal level cultivator to have the slightest improvement in his cultivation level. And what about Ling Han? Not counting the time he had taken to advance from the Shattering Void tier to immortal level, he had already raced all the way up to the medium extreme of the Sun-Moon tier. Finally, it still alerted a person of authority who had been in seclusion for a very long time. He decisively suppressed the argument of both sides, and commanded the Heaven Sword Palace to immediately summon the other 4 sections. They would send out all their elites to besiege Ling Han and kill him. Without considering anything else, merely for Ling Han's sin of opening the sky, he was intent on killing this man. Chapter 1278 All elites move out. Hunt down Ling Han. The higher-ups of the 5 sects sat together, discussing how they should deal with Ling Han. 5 Sun-Moon tier level forces, or perhaps among the top 5 greatest sects in this echelon, were actually joining forces to hunt down an ant from a small world who was only in the medium extreme of the Sun-Moon tier. In the past, this would have been unimaginable to them. But now, they were all thinking they had to eliminate him. That damn brat must have gotten some great fated opportunity to be capable of opening the sky previously. Otherwise, he could not have risen up in a short 20 years' time. This has broken the laws of the cultivation world. That's right. He managed to accommodate the power of the nation of the whole lower realm. This would have a frightening requirement for his physique. He must have gotten a precious treasure in the lower realm, and only then did he manage to advance so quickly even in the immortal realm. The lower realm is not so simple. At least, the 12 military officers subordinate to the Heavenly River King all entered this small world, and left behind their supreme inheritance. Unfortunately, the small world suppressed our power. We could not forcefully open the 12 palaces even if we entered. Perhaps, this brat has obtained the inheritance of the Heavenly River King. Gasp. The members of the 5 sects could no longer stay calm. Who was the Heavenly River King? In truth, they weren't very clear, either. They only knew that this was an incredibly powerful existence. Actually, even the 12 military officers were powerful and invincible. If they could obtain the inheritance of the Heavenly River King. No, even if it was just the inheritance of the 12 military officers, then they would at least be capable of matching Eternal River tier, wouldn't they? Who would be willing to accept inferiority? Especially in the case of cultivators, all of them had their own pride. We must apprehend that damn brat. Since he seeks his own demise from so far away, how can we not oblige? Send out all the elites. The 5 sects soon reached an agreement, which was to mobilize all the elites in their sections. Furthermore, to prevent one of the other sects from keeping the treasures to themselves, every team in search of Ling Han was a mix of people from all 5 sects. Each sect would send out 2 people, and small teams comprised of 10 members were thus born. Of course, even if it was the 5 sects, they still had a limited number of Sun-Moon tier elites. Although sending out so many people into the vast 2-realm battlefield was not equivalent to a drop of water entering the ocean, in truth there was not much difference from that. Moreover, considering the fact that Ling Han would occasionally enter into the Black Tower to concoct alchemical pills, the chances of them successfully finding Ling Han dropped considerably. In truth, Ling Han had no plans of hiding. He very boldly searched for both his enemies and realm spirit stones in the 2-realm battlefield, yet still did not encounter anyone from the 5 sects, so what could he do? When it looked like 3 months were about to pass, Ling Han was both expectant and anxious. Very soon, he would be able to take the Berserk Blood Spirit Pill to improve his power, but before that, he had to first burn himself in the immortal flame. Just the thought of that caused a muscle to twitch in his cheek. Ding ding ding. Sounds of battle could be heard ahead of him. Ling Han was not the nosy type, but this was the 2-realm battlefield. What if it was a battle between beings of the netherworld and cultivators of the immortal realm? He immediately rushed forwards, but when he saw both sides of the battle, he couldn't help but shake his head. This was not a conflict between the immortal realm and the netherworld. Instead, both sides were human. Obviously, this was either a battle of vengeance, or a fight for profit. And in the case of profit, it would be even simpler. A realm spirit stone should have appeared here, which caused a conflict to rise up between the two sides. However, both sides were very strong as they were on the level of the consummate level of the Sun-Moon tier. When they saw Ling Han suddenly appear, both sides paused slightly. However, when they realized that Ling Han was all alone, and his cultivation level was only in the medium extreme of the Sun-Moon tier, naturally no one would care about him. They continued the battle once more. Stop! Stop! However, only after a few moves, one of the two sides suddenly called a halt. Humph, you were the ones who picked the fight. Now what do you want to do? The other side asked. The person who called a halt said, "We'll let you have that realm spirit stone." This shocked the other side. To be honest, they were at a disadvantage here, yet if the other side wanted to eliminate all of them, they would also have to pay a heavy price. Thus, the other side was planning on wearing them down until their side lost all their fighting spirit and took the initiative to hand over the realm spirit stone in exchange for a chance to flee all this while. But they had never thought that the other side would actually stop the battle at this time. They retreated, and saw the other side did not move. After carefully running far enough into distance, they hurriedly ran with their full strength, and very soon disappeared. He, this is really traveling far and wide to look for you, only to find you easily. You actually delivered yourself right to our doorstep, a middle-aged man who had a sword on his back said calmly. His eyes fixed on Ling Han, exuding a powerful coldness from his gaze. The intelligence is indeed accurate. Medium extreme of the Sun-Moon tier. A middle-aged woman continued. Brat, kneel and accept your death. We can give you a quick end. This was an old woman. Her figure was humped, and she held a walking stick in her hand. Ling Han broke into a grin and said, "What a coincidence. I was just thinking of looking for you guys." He saw the sign of the Heaven Sword Palace on the two people's sleeves, and out of the remaining 8, every 2 people had the same sign. Very easily, he deduced that they came respectively from the Cloud Phoenix sect, Absolute Saber sect, Blue Thunder sect, and Earth Dragon sect. Humph, I have always wanted to see how this brat that opened the sky looked like. Has he actually eaten the liver of a true dragon or the heart of a true phoenix to actually be so outrageously bold? The old woman raised the walking stick, and then suddenly sent it down in a series of knocks. Ka. Suddenly, a crack appeared on the ground's surface, and quickly stretched out towards Ling Han. And just as the ground cracked open, there actually appeared endless darkness underground, which formed multiple snake-like creatures. They weren't snakes but earth dragons, or rather earthworms. Disgusting! Ling Han humphed, and sent out his sword in a slash. Millions of sword projections swept out, and these earthworms were all severed into pieces, once again turning into shadows. At this strike, all 10 members of the 5 sects looked shocked. Though the old woman had not used her full power, Ling Han was still very carefree and relaxed, not revealing his true abilities either. This young man could not be underestimated. Please hold the lines for me, everyone. Don't let this junior flee, and wait until I take him down. The sword-bearing man took 1 step forwards. Suddenly, sword intent set out, the sharp chi cutting right through the air itself. He was an elite from the Heaven's Sword Palace. Sword cultivators indeed possessed frightening destructive ability. Among the 5 sects, whether it was the Earth Dragon sect, the Cloud Phoenix sect, or the Blue Thunder sect, they were actually not pure humans, but rather half-human, which meant that they were the descendants born from the union of divine beast and human. They were stronger than ordinary immortals, especially when they awakened their bloodline. They weren't just a little bit stronger at that time. For example, the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden had reached the consummate level of the Sun-Moon tier only after 10,000 years since entering into the immortal realm. Unfortunately, it was limited to the level of the 5 sects. They did not have any cultivation technique to allow them to advance 1 step further, and could only remain on the consummate level. If they did not get any special encounter, they would remain on this level for the rest of their lives. However, the Heaven Sword Palace could stand as an equal with these 3 sects, and from one aspect, It proved how strong sword cultivators were since they could compensate for their shortcoming of the lack of bloodline. Furthermore, this elite had reached the peak stage of the consummate level of the Sun-Moon tier. Merely aiming the tip of his blade at Ling Han, he made Ling Han feel as if his skin was about to tear. His sword intent was truly frightening. Too strong. Chapter 1279 Escape and Counterkill. Cultivation level was not equivalent to battle prowess. Ling Han was sure that this man that was pointing his sword at him had to be a 3-star genius at least, or even a 4-star genius. At present, he was definitely incapable of matching this kind of elite. In truth, his battle prowess had only reached the peak stage of the high extreme of the Sun-Moon tier, and taking into consideration that Heaven's Might had weakened the other by a sub-minor level, he could only match an opponent in the early stage of the consummate level. Of course, if the Misty Soul Capturing Flower was effective, that would be another story. However, in a head-on clash, Ling Han did not doubt in the slightest that he would be slashed into halves by the other party. Never doubt the destructive ability of a sword cultivator. Ling Han's present physique was only slightly above level 7 godly metal, and had not reached the extent of level 8 yet. And even if he had reached level 8, if the other's battle prowess could really surpass 3 to 4 stars, he would still be capable of considerable destructiveness against level 8 godly metal. Ling Han directly drew out the Misty Soul Capturing Flower. Instantly, the spirits of the 10 people on the scene were all captured, but it was only a mere instant. The 4 elites from the Heaven's Sword Palace and the Absolute Saber Sect all had clear eyes. Those that had cultivated Sword Heart, Saber Heart, and had reached the illumination level all had sturdy spirits. It was much too difficult to affect their spirit. This was also why sword and saber cultivators were so troublesome. They lived only for killing, and had long since severed their other emotions, so it was very difficult to move their spirit. Of course, this was also because these 4 people had cultivation levels high enough. Otherwise, the Misty Soul Capturing Flower would still have effect on them. Die! A sword slashed over. 4 suns and moons all shone with bright light, creating a frightening power. Fuck! When he saw that the Misty Soul Capturing Flower was ineffective, Ling Han knew that things were not good. He quickly put away the demonic flower, and began to break out of the siege using the star-plucking step. Where are you going? The remaining 3 people from the Absolute Saber Sect and Heaven's Sword Palace all brandished their weapons in a strike at the same time, and the remaining 6 people all returned to their senses after the Misty Soul Capturing Flower had been put away. They all paled drastically, and began their respective attacks as well. This brat actually had this kind of unusual item on him. If it were not for the fact that they had 4 companions who had cultivated Sword Heart and Saber Heart, they would probably have fallen for this trick. Who knew, they might have even died here. The moment they thought that they could have possibly died so carelessly in the hands of a junior, they all flew into rage out of humiliation, wanting nothing more but to tear Ling Han into a million pieces. Ling Han did not zealously continue fighting, and instead put his all into breaking out of the siege. Can you leave? The 10 great elites all humphed coldly. The weakest among them was in the early stage of the consummate level of the Sun-Moon tier, and if the 10 of them joined forces, it was enough to kill any cultivator in the consummate level of the Sun-Moon tier, what more when he was just in the medium extreme of the Sun-Moon tier. Hong, various attacks intertwined, incredibly dazzling with their brightness. Pang pang pang. Ling Han was repeatedly hit, but after he forcefully took a few heavy blows, he finally tore through the siege, and successfully escaped. There were quite a few bloody holes in his body, but he was still indifferent, and said, "I will remember this debt. I will seek out each of you for repayment in future." The 10 people from the 5 sects were all astonished. He was still alive even after all. Fuck that. If it had been them, they would definitely have died with any one of those attacks, yet a medium extreme cultivator actually survived, and still managed to threaten them coldly. A coldness rose up in their hearts. This brat definitely could not be left alive. You will only die here today, so what future would you still have? The 10 people moved, determined to kill Ling Han. This was not just for eliminating a future powerful foe, but also for the great secret that Ling Han possessed. They would absolutely not believe that a lowly commoner from a small world could reach this step just with his own merits. He must have hidden some astonishing fated opportunity. Who knew? It might really be the inheritance of the Heavenly River King. Ling Han humphed, and used the star-plucking step, running with all his might. The 10 members of the 5 sects hurriedly pursued, but the moment they started the pursuit, they realized they actually could not catch up with Ling Han. Not only were they unable to catch up to him, the distance was still continuously increasing. Such a fast movement technique definitely cannot be used for long. Give chase, we must eliminate this disaster. If we do not get rid of this brat, we will not be able to rest or eat in peace. Yet Ling Han very soon disappeared without a trace. The 10 people were helpless, and could only separate to search for him. After Ling Han had escaped, he had already hidden in the Black Tower. He did not enter into the Black Tower at the first instant, firstly because he did not want to reveal the secret of the Black Tower, and secondly because he did not want to depend too much on the Black Tower, hiding inside the moment he met with danger. He channeled a drop of indestructible true fluid, and the injuries of his body immediately recovered at a visible pace. In truth, he was very seriously wounded. Those were 10 elites at the consummate level of the Sun Moon tier, and a few of them had not just reached the peak stage of the consummate level, but were even 3-star geniuses and 4-star geniuses. One blow from them, and his blood and flesh was sent flying. Even his godly bones had almost been broken by the attacks. He rubbed his neck. That elite from the Heaven's Sword Palace almost severed his head with a single strike. With the use of the indestructible true fluid, the injury had already recovered, but Ling Han still felt lingering fear. If it were not for the fact that his godly bones were strong enough, his head would definitely have been separated from his body by now. He was in the Black Tower, but his vision was not affected. He discovered that there was a person running towards him, and it was precisely that old woman from the Earth Dragon sect. Even though she was holding a walking stick, her speed was incredibly fast. It was as if she could shrink the distance, covering more than 300 meters with a single step. She was alone. Ling Han smirked coldly. Just right, he had suffered such a heavy loss, so he was just thinking of venting his ire on someone. The old woman suddenly stopped. She had the bloodline of the Earth Dragon, and was very sensitive to smells. She could vaguely smell Ling Han's scent, but when she reached this place, it had suddenly vanished. How strange. Could it be that he had tunneled into the ground? She released a battle cry, wanting to summon her other companions. However, just at this moment, a sword light suddenly flashed, bringing with it endless killing intent and slashing down at her neck. What? The old woman was incredibly astonished. There was obviously not one person in this place, so where did this sword light come from? She forcibly brandished her walking stick to meet the incoming sword light, and when she turned, she saw that this sword was held in the hand of a young man. It was Ling Han. She was stunned and furious. She had not thought that not only had Ling Han not fled in defeat, he actually dared to hide here to ambush her. Yet his methods of concealing himself were really too good. Even she had not found him, and at this time, she was concentrating fully on sensing Ling Han's disappeared aura, so this could be considered a time when her defenses were the lowest. This strike was earth-shattering, a major disaster so frightening it was indescribable. Pang! Her walking stick still parried the sword strike, but because she had moved in a hurry, her power was inadequate. Instantly, this strike sent her walking stick flying. However, she also managed to gain some time, her figure hurriedly retreating. Ling Han approached. Because the two of them were too near to each other, he did not have the space to brandish his sword. He simply allowed the divine demon sword to leave his hand and automatically attack, while he shot out his fists in a series of punches at the old woman. The old woman was desperate to stay alive, and shielded herself with her arms as she hurriedly retreated. She absolutely did not have the time to wonder why Ling Han, who had just been severely wounded, could look like he was completely unharmed in an instant. At this time, the battle cry echoed out endlessly, and the other 9 people were also rapidly rushing over. The old woman was elated. As long as she could hold on for just a little bit longer, when her reinforcements reached, the attacking and defending positions would switch, and it would be Ling Han's turn to try to escape with all his might. You will not have the chance. Ling Han smirked coldly, and the misty soul-capturing flower suddenly appeared. The old woman was shocked, and hurriedly wanted to close her eyes. However, this demonic flower had direct effect on the divine sense, so there was absolutely no difference whether you closed your eyes or not. In the instant she closed her eyes, she saw 9 figures rushing towards her from various directions. However, this was also the last scene that she would see in her life. Pang! Ling Han smashed the old woman's head with a single punch, and even her spirit was destroyed as well. He looked coldly at the remaining 9 people from the 5 sects, and used a motion technique to sprint madly without the slightest hesitation, endlessly stretching out the distance between himself and the other 9 people in an instant. Chapter 1280 High Bounty. When the other 9 members of the 5 sects ran to the old woman, they all stopped. Each of their faces was covered with ice, with a sliver of indescribable coldness. The 10 of them had joined forces, and Ling Han still managed to flee. Not only had he successfully fled, he had taken advantage of the time when they had separated to pursue him, and turned the tables around to kill one of them. It should be known that Ling Han previously had been severely wounded. What a frightening physique, what frightening recovery ability, what frightening schemes, and what frightening decisiveness. Faced with this kind of enemy, all 9 felt their hearts grow heavy. This brat has to be gotten rid of as soon as possible. That's right, or we will all have a tragic end. The 9 of them looked at the old woman's body, whose head had been smashed, and felt their hearts shudder. They felt sympathy that came from seeing a peer killed in this way. This kind of thing could possibly happen to them as well. Even the 4 people from the Heaven Sword Palace and Absolute Saber sect, who had cultivated Sword Heart and Saber Heart and severed their other emotions, unmoved by external factors, could feel a full body shiver. That was because Ling Han did not only possess the Misty Soul Capturing Flower, but his abilities on their own were even more amazing. Perhaps Ling Han would have the strength to overthrow the 5 sects in another 100 years. To Sun Moon Tears, 100 years' time was really much too fast, and it was completely impossible that there would appear a genius that could save them from their desperate crisis in the 5 sects in this little bit of time. The time given was much too short. This was the scary thing about top-grade prodigies. 100 years might only seem like a blink of an eye to you, wherein nothing would change, but for a prodigy, it was enough time for an explosive improvement to appear in their strength. Spare no expense, find this brat and kill him. All 9 forced out through gritted teeth. It was no longer a matter of pride, and not about how they could snatch away his fated opportunity after they killed him. It had become a problem of their own survival. There was no one who would be willing to wait for death, especially in the case of elites like them. They would definitely counterattack madly. After Ling Han ran a distance away, he once again entered into the Black Tower. He was very pleased with himself. Despite being ganged up on by 10 elites, he still managed to get rid of one. However, this was done with the help of the Misty Soul Capturing Flower. I myself am still not strong enough. Ling Han very soon suppressed his self-satisfaction, and reflected on himself. 3 months' time is almost up again. Small Tower appeared, and informed Ling Han that he could enter into the immortal flame cauldron to temper himself again. Ling Han shivered, yet still stood up without hesitation. Running in a panic due to being hunted down by the 5 sects caused him to be even more determined to pursue true strength. He threw himself into the cauldron to be tempered by the immortal flame. 3 days later, Ling Han came out of the cauldron. Naturally, he was still an infant, but looked to be about 10 months old. Allow me to correct. If you can maintain this kind of rate of improvement, you will be able to completely grasp rising from the ashes after about 100 more times, Small Tower said. That was right. A few hundred times dropped to 100 times could be considered a massive improvement. Yet Ling Han's expression was still dark. He had to go through this 100 times to be able to complete tempering his body with immortal flame. Just the thought of it made him nauseous. But he had just tempered his body with the immortal flame, so he forced himself not to think about it. Ling Han drew out the Berserk Blood Spirit Pill and ate it. This was his main motive in agreeing to temper his body with the immortal flame. He needed more power. Under the reincarnation tree, 3 days were equivalent to 3 years. Ling Han stood up. His cultivation level had progressed one step further and reached the late stage of the medium extreme, while his battle prowess had soared up to the early stage of the consummate level. Added with the help of Heaven's Might and the Divine Demon Sword, he could even fight someone in the late stage of the consummate level. However, I will still be a bit weak against an opponent in the peak stage of the consummate level. What more when the 5 sects still have elites whose battle prowess surpasses the peak stage, and their number is very astonishing as well. Ling Han was not self-satisfied. If his cultivation level could advance into the consummate level, then he would truly be capable of looking down on the 5 sects. I'll use the trash from the 5 sects to test out my battle prowess. Ling Han left the Black Tower and took the initiative to make trouble with the 5 sects. The moment he appeared, he found out that the 5 sects had really spared no expense to look for him now. Anyone from Wolfang City received a bounty notice. If they found Ling Han and revealed his location to the 5 sects, they would be given a realm spirit stone as reward. Though Wolfang City had a law that stated that immortals were not allowed to have internecine strife, the 5 sects were only looking for Ling Han and did not state that they wanted to do anything to Ling Han, though everyone knew that it definitely would not be anything good. Though the 2-realm battlefield was huge, there were also many people. Soon, someone discovered Ling Han's whereabouts and passed the information to the 5 sects, and the members of the 5 sects immediately charged over. After a bloody battle, Ling Han successfully broke through the siege. Though he suffered serious injuries, he also took the lives of 2 elites in the early stage of the consummate level of the other side, showing his character trait of being unwilling to take a loss in the slightest. This battle brought fear to the 5 sects because they discovered much to their shock that Ling Han had become even stronger. Only a mere few months had passed, and Ling Han's power had actually improved so apparently. This was too astonishing. The 5 sects had gone crazy, and began to search for Ling Han even more urgently, willing to spare no expense to destroy Ling Han. If it was not because they could not pay the price, they even wanted to ask heavenly body tier elites to move, and that would ensure their success. However, Ling Han went to the camp of the Purple Moon Army. He had not seen the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden for a long time, and the latter had to know that the 5 sects were currently targeting him. He had to meet the beauty at least once and reassure her. Holding the token, Ling Han entered into the Purple Moon Army. The Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden was just worrying about him, and had just completed a huge mission with the army. Thus, she decided to ask for a few days of leave, and planned to have a good reunion with Ling Han. Ling Han was naturally greatly pleased. Unfortunately, he had still not completely grasped rising from the ashes at this moment, so his true physique was only as big as a baby of 10 months old. He did not even have the ability to push her down, or have her push him down instead, so he could only be like a eunuch who made a trip to the brothel, unable to do anything. The couple shared a sweet time, and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden was extremely stunned by Ling Han's rate of advancement. She knew that Ling Han was the Alchemy Emperor, but he could not have been as fast as this even with divine pills. Come, I'll show you something good. Ling Han brought the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden into the Black Tower, and showed her the reincarnation tree as well as that saint that could no longer be considered a saint. However, the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden was still extremely stunned. What kind of good fortune had actually befallen on Ling Han that even the incomplete spirit of a saint was staying inside his spatial god tool? In comparison, the fact that Ling Han possessed a spatial god tool seemed to be insignificant because saints could forge spatial god tools. When I break through to the heavenly body tier, I can go into seclusion here. But as for now... The Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden shook her head. Her breakthrough was different as she needed to accumulate the power of her bloodline. This was something that the reincarnation tree could not help with. The couple talked for a while longer before finally coming out of the Black Tower. Ling Han started a fire, and began barbecuing some precious ingredients. He added the godly medicine from the Black Tower as well as a beard of ginseng from the old ginseng. The old ginseng had plucked it from himself after he advanced into the Sun Moon tier, so it was really extremely nutritious. However, to extract all the nutritious essence from this pot of ingredients required a very, very long time. After about 2 days, an extraordinary aroma wafted, and could be smelled in a 10 miles radius. Ling Han had just ladled out a bowl of soup for the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden when a small beast popped out from who knew where, drooling as it stared at that bowl of soup. So adorable! Instantly, the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden's eyes lit up. Probably a root hair. Chapter 1281 Little Beast and Little Bird. Ling Han's eyes swept over it, and a sliver of killing intent immediately seeped into his gaze. This was a creature of the netherworld. Yet he did not make a move. This little beast had just crossed over into the immortal level, and its power was extremely weak. Furthermore, it did not seem to have awakened its intelligence. Otherwise, it was absolutely impossible that it would still approach upon spotting 2 obviously human elites of the Sun Moon tier. This small beast looked like a cat, covered all over with snow-white fur, soft, bright, and shining with a silvery light. That appearance belonged to the category that one would immediately like it upon a single look. No wonder the heavenly phoenix divine maiden couldn't help but exclaim in surprise even with her cool, aloof personality. "Jiao! Jiao!" The little beast called out towards the heavenly phoenix divine maiden, its drool dripping even more quickly. The heavenly phoenix divine maiden looked towards Ling Han, and said, "Give it a share as well." "Did you not see that it is a creature of the netherworld?" Ling Han asked. "Still, it is so cute." The heavenly phoenix divine maiden could not resist at all. The little beast released a soft cry. "So adorable." Ling Han sighed, and could only draw out a bowl to ladle out a share for this little beast. Then he placed it over and said, "Little guy, finish this and run off quickly. A glutton like you should obediently stay in the netherworld. If you came to the immortal realm, wouldn't you just be filling someone's stomach?" Little beast immediately began to flick out its tongue to drink the soup. Perhaps it was too delicious, but its head poked in further and further. In the end, it lost its balance, and both its hind legs were sticking upwards. Ling Han was surprised. Even eating, and it still had to act cute. The heavenly phoenix divine maiden would probably be rendered completely incapable of resisting. He turned his head, and true enough, the sympathy in the heavenly phoenix divine maiden's eyes was practically overflowing. The little beast drank very quickly. Being capable of cultivating to the mountain river tier, how could it have no intelligence? Immediately, it chirped out at the heavenly phoenix divine maiden as if it knew that only begging her would be useful. Indeed, the heavenly phoenix divine maiden turned her eyes towards Ling Han, filled with plea. Ling Han sighed, and could only ladle out another bowl. One bowl followed another. This little beast's appetite was quite amazing. Ling Han couldn't help but be moved. It should be known that he used proper ingredients in consideration of the cultivation levels of both himself and the heavenly phoenix divine maiden. If it was given to a mountain river tier, they could still eat, but they definitely wouldn't be able to eat too much. Eating so vigorously like the little beast, they would definitely explode from all the richness. But the fact was that this little beast was still very energetic, playing cute and acting coy. There was absolutely no sign that it was about to explode anytime soon. Strange. After this little beast had single-handedly finished off half the meat stew, it was finally satisfied. It ran to the heavenly phoenix divine maiden, and happily wagged its tail, playing cute right to the very end. Meanwhile, the heavenly phoenix divine maiden was feeling extremely compassionate, and picked up the little beast, combing through its fur. She even gave it a massage, infuriating Ling Han. He had never seen this fierce woman treat him so gently before. Little beast seemed to sense Ling Han's unfriendly gaze, and curled in its claws, ducking into heavenly phoenix divine maiden's arms. "Don't scare it." The heavenly phoenix divine maiden warned Ling Han. "I give it food, I give it drink, and now it's even snatching away my wife." Ling Han glared at the little beast, but the little beast showed no weakness at all. It glared back at Ling Han while using its small head to rub against the heavenly phoenix divine maiden all the while. Obviously, it knew whose favor it should gauge. "Little monster from the netherworld will be eaten sooner or later," Ling Han threatened fiercely. "Jiao jiao." The little beast acted spoiled while looking like it had got a terrible scare. The heavenly phoenix divine maiden once again warned Ling Han seriously, causing him to feel very rueful. He had to quickly increase his cultivation level, or even his wife would be climbing over his head. Just at this moment, a soft cracking sound was heard. Ling Han involuntarily turned his eyes towards that egg that he had kept for who knew how long. Now, as long as he was free, he would take it out for some sunbathing, and that sound had originated from the eggshell. There was a crack. Another sound rang out, and the first crack appeared. Ling Han was greatly pleased. Was this guy finally about to hatch? This was the descendant of the azure flame vulture, and in truth was not of much help to Ling Han by now. However, he had nurtured it by his side for so many days, so he was still very expectant to see a new life break out of its egg. Knock, knock, knock. The azure flame vulture inside pecked continuously, and the eggshell broke gradually. Finally, the head of a small bird stretched out. This time, it did not continue to peck, but rather opened its beak and began to eat the eggshell. Soon, it chewed out a large round hole. This eggshell seemed to be extremely delicious because while the little bird had already eaten out a hole big enough for it to come out, it did not look like it had the slightest intention to stop at all. It was still there eating continuously, causing Ling Han to feel a slight urge to break off a piece to have a taste as well. As a glutton, he felt a heavy pressure. Ling Han, the heavenly phoenix divine maiden, and the little beast were all staring. Only when the little bird had completely chewed up the eggshell so that not one bit was left did it earnestly stand up on its small legs and look at the surroundings blankly. At first, it tilted its head to look at the heavenly phoenix divine maiden for a while, and then stared at the little beast. Finally, it turned its eyes towards Ling Han, raced towards him on its two little legs, leaned against his leg, and crouched down to rest. Did it think that he was its mommy? Hey. Putting aside the fact that he was male, what part of him looked like a bird? Fuck, what was wrong with its eyes? Meanwhile, the heavenly phoenix divine maiden was thrown over in laughter. This would be the best material to tease Ling Han about in future, and she could talk about it for the rest of her life. Ling Han shook his head, and sent the little bird into the Black Tower. He keenly sensed that this azure flame vulture would far surpass its mother in the future. It was said that the azure flame vulture had a sliver of the bloodline from the ancient divine beast, Azure Phoenix. If it could awaken its bloodline, this little bird would be very useful. Lady Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden. An exclamation of surprise was heard, and a few people walked over. They were all looking at the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, a burning admiration on their faces. They were disciples of the 5 sects. In the 5 sects, the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden was definitely a legendary character. She had only been in the immortal realm for 10,000 years, and had already reached the consummate level of the Sun-Moon tier already. She was the idol of who knew how many people. However, the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden had long since began to live in seclusion, and only left behind a stunning legend. Thus, these people were naturally excited at being able to see the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden in this place. But when they spotted the other person next to their idol, all their expressions shifted drastically. Ling Han. He was a monster. In a short few months, there was already a considerable number of elites from their sects that had died in Ling Han's hands, and this man was also a criminal that had opened the sky according to the 5 sects theory. The lower realm was a small world that they had operated for a few million years, producing very astonishing wealth, yet because of Ling Han, all that was now gone forever. Thus, whether they knew the truth or otherwise, all disciples of the 5 sects hated Ling Han very much. Lady Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden. This person is Ling Han. He is very dangerous. Leave him quickly. Someone called out to the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, fearing that she still did not know Ling Han's true face, and would be wounded if Ling Han went berserk. Yet the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden calmly said, I have long since severed my ties with the Cloud Phoenix sect, and all the matters of the 5 sects are no longer any concern of mine. She had long since repaid the kindness that the Cloud Phoenix sect had shown teaching her, and when the sect had sold her off to Xiadong Lai, that little bit of remaining kinship she had with the Cloud Phoenix sect had vanished. Those disciples of the 5 sects were stunned and furious. What exactly had Ling Han drugged the Heavenly Phoenix Maiden with that she now did not even recognize her own sect? Chapter 1282 Battling the Sword Emperor. Lady Heavenly Phoenix Maiden, do not be fooled by this evil demon. These disciples all called out as they sent out a signal to summon their other companions. The average power of the disciples of the 5 sects was very strong. For people like them, who had only cultivated for hundreds of thousands of years yet had all advanced into the Sun-Moon tier, it was not because they had all awoken their bloodline, but rather because they had taken the realm pill. Of course, it was not complete, but the diluted version. Otherwise, there would not have been enough to be distributed. Yet even so, the overall power of the 5 sects had seen a very large improvement. They were practically no inferior to any other force of the heavenly body tier. Without reaching the Sun-Moon tier, they would not have dared to run over to the 2-realm battlefield to hunt Ling Han down. If they were only in the Mountain River tier, they definitely would have been going to their deaths. The Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden cuddled the little beast, and said, You have said all you need to say. If you continue to blabber nonsense, I will definitely not be merciful. Her eyes were menacing. Since she had already severed her relations with the 5 sects, whoever made a move on Ling Han would be attacking her. Heavenly Phoenix Maiden, did you not call yourself the Ling family's widow, and would only live for one person? A bout of laughter rang out from afar. In a mere instant, a young man shot over at an extraordinarily fast pace. He bore a sword that had an ancient air to it on his back, and exuded an aura that seemed otherworldly. Ling Han's eyes swept over this newcomer, and his eyes involuntarily narrowed. The Sword Emperor. 10,000 years ago, there was a total of 7 heaven tiers in the lower realm. They were known as the king tiers of that generation, and the Sword Emperor was ranked in the first place, above both the setting Sun Saber Emperor and the heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden. In their reunion 10,000 years later, the Sword Emperor had already advanced into the high extreme of the Sun-Moon tier. Though he was not as incredible as the heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, it was still very, very exaggerated. The Realm Pill was indeed awesome, but what was more crucial was his own natural talent. Otherwise, why would those who had cultivated more tens of thousands of years, or even an additional several hundreds of thousands years, still be in the low extreme of the Sun-Moon tier? The heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden looked towards this old rival from the past, her expression unchanging, and said, "Is what I do any concern of yours?" As she spoke, a few more people rushed over. This time they were much stronger, and there was no lack of elites in the consummate level of the Sun-Moon tier. Ho ho! The Sword Emperor shook his head, appearing to be disdainful. You praised yourself as being pure and untouched, but weren't you still moved and gotten involved with another man? Ling Han naturally was unwilling to allow his wife be insulted, even if it was just a misunderstanding. He spoke up, Sword Emperor, we have not met for 10,000 years. Do you dare battle me? Sword Emperor. A great many people were confused. Whom was this evil demon talking to? Yet the Sword Emperor felt his heartbeat quicken. He had taken this name when he was in the small world, but when he entered into the immortal realm, he took the initiative to remove this nickname and seal it away temporarily, restoring his real name. Otherwise, if he still called himself the Sword Emperor in the immortal realm, wouldn't that be attracting hatred? Was he complaining that he wasn't dying fast enough? How did this brat know? Hold on, this brat was also called Ling Han, and furthermore, the heavenly Phoenix Maiden was willing to become hostile with her sect for his sake. So could it be? A shocking guess rose up in his heart, but there was still a point of doubt, and that was, if Ling Han was that person, how had he passed the time of 10,000 years? This thought merely flashed past, and he had already found his own answer. Time liquid. Since the elites of the 5 sects had accumulated their disciples throughout the generations with this item, why could Ling Han not do the same? Very long ago, the 5 sects had once been conquered by Ma Duo Bao. At the time, their foundations had almost been severed, and the time liquid had also all been taken. If Ling Han obtained the time liquid from this channel, then everything could be logically explained. You are Ling Han. The Sword Emperor stared at Ling Han. Ling Han knew what he meant, and so said, Hee, after you requested that I concoct alchemical pills for you, I secretly learnt 3 sword techniques from you, sorry about that. When he said this, the Sword Emperor no longer had any doubts. This Ling Han was not only the criminal who had come through opening the sky, but was also the Alchemy Emperor from 10,000 years ago. No wonder his rate of cultivation was so fast with the best quality alchemical pills available to him every day. How could it not be fast? I never thought that you were actually someone that had long since died. The Sword Emperor's expression became menacing. If I had known that you would have become such a big threat to the sect, I really should have killed you long ago. Though Ling Han was his equal in cultivation level 10,000 years ago, in terms of battle prowess, he really was a joke. Zhang Hang, do you want to die? The heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden flew into a thunderous rage, her killing intent even stronger than the Sword Emperor's. The Sword Emperor's real name was Zhang Hang. After he came to the immortal realm, he took the name of Zhang Hang, no longer being called the Sword Emperor. Wife, allow me. Ling Han restrained the heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden. He had long since wanted to battle once more with the Sword Emperor and the setting Sun Saber Emperor. Now, the Sword Emperor's cultivation level was above his, so it could not be considered as bullying him too much. This ignited his fighting spirit. Be careful, he is a 4-star genius, the heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden said in a low voice. The reason why she had rushed to speak up for him was because she did not want Ling Han to fight the Sword Emperor. Ling Han's battle prowess was at the early stage of the consummate level at most, and he could fight someone in the middle stage of the consummate level, while the Sword Emperor was in the late stage of the high extreme, and was also a 4-star genius at that, so his battle prowess was at about the late stage of the consummate level. His ultimate battle prowess still had a gap of 1 star. This meant that Ling Han would definitely lose. Ling Han nodded and said, "Don't worry. I am still unable to beat you now, but as for this guy, he's just a piece of cake." The Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden rolled her eyes. This guy was really petty. Didn't she just suppress him a few times in the past? Did he have to keep those few times in mind constantly like this? "Sword Emperor, come, let's battle." Ling Han challenged the Sword Emperor. The Sword Emperor looked nostalgic and said, "It has been a very long time since I have been called the Sword Emperor. However, there will be one day that I will let this name once again be known." What great ambition! In the immortal realm, titles like King, Majestic Emperor, and Imperial Emperor could not be used simply like that, because the Royal Empire, Majestic Empire, and Imperial Empire existed. If you used it anyway, you would commit a taboo. For example, if Zhang Hang was to call himself the Sword Emperor, then wouldn't that be the equivalent of placing himself on the same level as Eternal River Tier? What would the Heavenly Body Tiers think about that? A mere Sun-Moon Tier wanted to climb over their heads. That was purely courting death. Now that Zhang Hang said that he would make the name of the Sword Emperor once again become known, it meant that he was confident that he could advance into the Eternal River Tier, and he deserved to be admired merely for this ambitious spirit. Ling Han nodded. This was the Sword Emperor that he knew. He said, "On the basis of our previous relations, I hope you can leave the Heaven Sword Palace and pursue your own path if you lose." "Haha, say this again after you beat me." Zhang Heng drew his sword. Wang, a frightening murderous aura instantly soared into the skies. His fighting spirit and sword intent had fused together, forming a divine sword that seemed capable of even slicing apart the heavens. Ling Han sighed internally. In mere terms of sword Dao, the other's level of mastery was indeed superior to his because of his single-mindedness. Ling Han was studying too many fields. Alchemy occupied a very large part of his concentration, and there was also a considerable number of other assorted fields. However, precisely because of these assorted other fields, the present him was born. Ling Han did not draw the divine demon sword, but rather clenched his hands into fists. Divine patterns appeared on his fists, causing these 2 fists to grow continuously in size until they became almost like mountains. "I punch." He took the initiative to attack. Chapter 1283 Whose Sword is Stronger? Ling Han threw both of his fists, and they were like 2 mountains as they bore down on Zhang Hang. Boom! A devastating aura swept forth before Ling Han's fists had even arrived. The space around them collapsed, and the stars and clouds in the sky all lost their luster. The disciples of the 5 sects fled in disarray. Not to mention those at the low extreme of the Sun-Moon Tier. Even those at the medium extreme and high extreme didn't dare to face Ling Han's iron fists head-on. Simply being scraped by them would be enough to wound them severely. Ling Han's physique was as tough as level 7 godly metal, perhaps even stronger. Moreover, the battle right now was completely playing to his strengths and maximizing his advantages. His iron fists arrived before Zhang Heng. However, Zhang Heng was unfazed as he slashed his sword toward the sky. Shwa! A burst of sword chi sliced through the air and slashed into the 2 mountain-like fists. Wang! Surprisingly, Ling Han's fists were sent reeling back. Strong! In terms of power, he was clearly no match for Zhang Heng. After all, Zhang Heng's cultivation level was far higher than his. Not only that, but he was also a 4-star genius. Thus, Ling Han's power of 6 stars was only equivalent to a 2-star advantage. However, a mere 2 stars weren't enough to overcome the difference in cultivation level between them. 10,000 years ago, you couldn't even withstand a single strike of mine. Now, 10,000 years later, you're still no match for me. Zhang Heng said arrogantly. He advanced with his sword. He hadn't taken the path of becoming one with his weapon. First of all, he still had yet to reach the consummate level. Second of all, he had lofty ambitions, and he wasn't content with being at the Sun-Moon Tier. He wanted to become an Eternal River Tier elite. Thus, he naturally wouldn't fuse his suns and moons into his god tool and sever his own path of cultivation. Ling Han laughed loudly and said, "I thought you were going to say that I still couldn't withstand a single strike of yours. If this is all you've got, I'll chop your head off in less than 10 exchanges. Zhang Hang slashed at Ling Han, and it was as if the might of heaven and earth was also circulating with his sword. Ling Han nodded inwardly. In terms of sword Dao alone, Zhang Hang was indeed worthy of being called the Sword Emperor. He was very, very powerful. However, Ling Han wasn't weak, either. Ling Han transformed his fists into fingers. Xiu xiu xiu. He continued to snap his fingers, and bursts of vicious sword chi shot toward Zhang Hang. This was the lightning sword technique. Although he hadn't achieved great accomplishment in the lightning sword technique yet, he had most likely reached small accomplishment already. His technique contained speed and destructiveness, and it was also in harmony with the might of the great Tao. It even contained a wisp of heaven's might. Even if he didn't unleash this technique with his divine demon sword, it would still be as powerful as the strike of a true dragon. It was filled with a domineering aura that yearned to crush the world. Zhang Heng couldn't help but feel surprised. He was a sword wielder as well, and he had devoted his entire life to the sword, had an incredible obsession with the sword Dao. Although Ling Han had formed swords by merely snapping his fingers just then, his strikes had made him feel a profound sword intent. This sword intent was far above his comprehension. He was completely stunned. Although he had given up his title of Sword Emperor, he was still an extremely proud individual. He believed that he was simply limited by his cultivation level. If he were to battle others on an equal footing, he was confident that he could use his sword to defeat any Heavenly Body Tier Elite or Eternal River Tier Elite. However, his confidence was shattered by Ling Han's ferocious sword intent. This person who he had deemed unworthy of being his opponent in the past, had actually surpassed him in the sword Dao. He refused to accept this. Zhang Heng roared as he unleashed the full power of his sword Dao. Sword Qi burst into the air, transforming into countless black blades that slashed at Ling Han. They were as dense as a dark cloud. Ling Han was fearless as he faced this attack head-on. The members of the 5 sects watched on in utter shock. Most of them had never seen Ling Han before, and they had only heard of his terrible deeds. Right now, they couldn't help but feel stunned with his ability to hold his own against Zhang Hang. This was absolutely incredible. Although Zhang Hang was only at the high extreme, his battle prowess had already soared to the consummate level. In fact, even many senior elites were no match for him. He was known as the strongest rising star of the Heaven Sword Palace, and he enjoyed an equally great reputation with the Heavenly Phoenix Maiden. However, Ling Han's strength was only on the same level as Zhang Hang. So why did the 5 sects treat him with such caution? Why had they deployed all of their elites to deal with just a single person? Just look at the scenes before them. It was clear that Zhang Hang was enjoying an advantage over him. If this fight continued, the loser would definitely be Ling Han. Just Zhang Hang alone was enough to deal with him. So, why were the 5 sects making so much fuss? However, Zhang Heng knew otherwise. He was indeed enjoying an advantage over Ling Han, but this was only because he possessed a higher cultivation level. In terms of sword Dao alone, he had already lost. How can such a profound sword technique exist? How can it combine speed and power so seamlessly? There was an unbearable itch in his heart. As someone who was obsessed with the sword, he was willing to pay any price to learn the profound secret of Ling Han's sword technique. Enough! Since this is the limit of that brat's abilities, let's attack together and kill him. This was an elder who had been observing the battle from the sidelines. After observing for a long time, he had concluded that this was the limit of Ling Han's strength. This made him feel much more at ease. In any case, they weren't here to battle Ling Han one-on-one. They were here to kill this demon who might shake the 5 sects foundations in the future. Several consummate-level elites stepped forward. They knew that Ling Han possessed huge secrets, and this was an opportunity to help the 5 sects soar into the sky. If they obtained his secrets, perhaps they could advance to the Heavenly Body Tier or even the Eternal River Tier. Fall back! The Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden shouted. Boom! The projection of 2 phoenix wings that measured almost 500 meters each unfurled from her back. However, they burned with real flames, and this further highlighted her breathtaking beauty. She was like a stunningly beautiful war goddess. Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, are you really going to betray us? Several elders chided. They were so infuriated that they were almost about to vomit blood. In their minds, The Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden was only as powerful as she was thanks to the help of the 5 sects. However, not only was she not repaying the 5 sects, but she was even helping their biggest enemy. This was despicable to the extreme. If you take another step, I'll consider you my enemy, the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden said menacingly. She had barely received any benefits from the Cloud Phoenix sect. In any case, she completely loathed realm pills. It was because her bloodline had awakened that she was able to advance to the consummate level of the Sun-Moon tier in such a short amount of time. The elders exchanged a glance before nodding in tacit understanding. They definitely couldn't let Ling Han escape. What would they do if he went into hiding and reappeared after tens of thousands of years? With his freakish talents, he would be able to crush the 5 sects once he reached the consummate level of the Sun-Moon tier. Elder Yu, Elder Chen, you two hold the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden back. Everyone else, follow me and capture that brat. Understood. The elders immediately launched into action. The Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden was infuriated, and balls of flames curled through the air as she flapped her wings, releasing a formidable might. She was only at the consummate level, but her bloodline meant that these flames possessed a wisp of the true Phoenix's devastating might. Thus, these flames were naturally terrifying. This was a suppression from a superior level. The elders groaned at the same time, a pained expression spreading across their faces. They were completely speechless. Against someone with a stronger bloodline, they were at a disadvantage before they had even started fighting. The Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden lashed out with her palm as she dashed forward. There was the cry of a phoenix, and a multicolored phoenix suddenly materialized in the air and swooped toward the members of the 5 sects. This phoenix was enveloped in divine flames. Charge! The members of the 5 sects roared. Since the Heavenly Phoenix Maiden refused to see reason, they would simply kill her alongside Ling Han. Chapter 1284 We LL Battle Another Day. The thought process of the members of the 5 sects was extremely simple. The Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden was only at the consummate level of the Sun-Moon tier, so they would definitely be able to contain her if not suppress her if enough of them charged over. However, their understanding of the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden was restricted to what they knew about her several thousand years ago. At that time, the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden had chosen to go into seclusion after deciding that she had already repaid the Cloud Phoenix sect. Back then, she had only been at the high extreme of the Sun-Moon tier. Many years had now passed, and the 5 sects all knew that she had already advanced to the consummate level. However, they speculated that she was at most at the early stage or middle stage. After all, the higher one's cultivation, the harder it would be to advance. In reality, however, the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden had already reached the peak stage of the consummate level. Not only that, but she was even a 4-star genius. Even ordinary cultivators at the peak stage of the consummate level wouldn't be able to withstand a single strike of hers, so how could cultivators below the peak stage stand up to her? Wails of agony reverberated around the areas that had been engulfed by the flaming phoenix. The members of the 5 sects clasped their heads as they fled, and even a few elites at the consummate level of the Sun-Moon tier stumbled back in retreat, not daring to face her attacks head-on. What can we do? We can't even deal with the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, so how are we going to capture Ling Han? Why are the reinforcements still not here? An elder asked angrily. This was a nonsensical question. Right now, numerous members of the 5 sects were scattered all over the 2-realm battlefield, searching for Ling Han. It would definitely take longer than 2 days to notify all of them. After they were notified, they would still need to hurry back. Anyhow, they were unable to capture Ling Han and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden even with such a huge advantage in numbers. Thus, the elder was naturally beside himself with fury. However, Zhang Hing suddenly stopped attacking and asked, "Is this your full strength?" "No," Ling Han replied with a shake of his head. He still hadn't taken full advantage of his powerful physique yet, nor had he used his freakish recovery ability. Moreover, he still had the Misty Soul Capturing Flower, although it would most likely be useless against Zhang Heng. In any case, he still had many more trump cards. At least he still hadn't started to ingest alchemical pills yet. Zhang Heng looked up at the sky. He was indeed enjoying an advantage at this moment. However, he was unable to suppress Ling Han no matter what he did. His opponent was astonishingly resilient, and he could easily take everything that he threw at him. He nodded and said, "From today onward, I'll travel the world in search of a sword Dao that truly belongs to me. The day that I achieve great accomplishment is the day that I'll come back to challenge you. I hope you're still alive at that time." Ling Han laughed loudly and said, "Fine. If you don't find me here, you can go to the Great Ling Empire of the Joint Peace Planet. That's my territory." "I'll keep that in mind," Zhang Heng said with a nod. He sheathed his sword before turning around and leaving. He appeared especially relaxed and carefree. Zhang Heng, the higher-ups of the 5 sects roared in fury. Why was there another traitor among them? Ling Han smiled and said, "You people should thank him for keeping your inheritances alive. After all of you will be killed by me. Brat, you're merely riding on the coattail of a woman. What is there to be smug about?" One of the mighty figures roared. He wanted to provoke Ling Han and anger him into asking the Heavenly Phoenix Maiden to stand aside. Ling Han laughed and said, "If you want, you can also ride on the coattail of a woman. I don't mind at all." Fuck! The members of the 5 sects all seethed with anger. The key point was that the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden had been one of them before. Yet, she had now defected to Ling Han. How could they not grit their teeth in anger? Ling Han's expression suddenly became cold, and he said, "I've come to collect some interest today." If these people had cultivated normally, how could they have reached the Sun Moon tier at such a young age? They had definitely ingested realm pills. He would kill them without mercy. Ling Han charged over, snapping his fingers as he did so. Xiu xiu xiu. Bursts of sword chi rained down on his enemies. Ah! Swathes of disciples instantly collapsed to the ground. Many of them weren't at the consummate level yet, so how could they withstand such a devastating attack? They were dead before they had even hit the ground. The elders were enraged. They tried to rush toward Ling Han to protect their disciples, yet the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden beat her wings and flew over, sending searing flames through the air. The elders had no choice but to stop and battle her with their full strength. After a few seconds, the disciples of the 5 sects all became corpses on the ground. The elders were the only remaining survivors. Ling Han stopped attacking. Although the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden had already split with the 5 sects, it was clear that she still hadn't steeled her heart to kill them. Ling Han didn't want to pressure her into killing them, either. However, he wasn't strong enough to kill these elders himself, so he naturally stopped attacking. "Let's go," Ling Han said as he wrapped his arm around the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden's willowy waist. She shuddered slightly, and a deep blush appeared on her beautiful face. Hiss! The little beast in her lap bared its teeth at Ling Han as if it were feeling threatened. This man was trying to steal its woman. What are hissing for? Ling Han flicked the little beast's head, causing it to clasp its head and groan in pain. "Don't bully him," the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden said unhappily. "Fine, my yearning of 10,000 years is no match for a little beast's acting cute for a few hours. What a failure." Ling Han glared at the little beast and thought, when I reunite with Rabbit and the old Ginseng, I've got to persuade them to kill this little beast. We'll enjoy a delicious netherworld beast meal. This little beast actually dared to target his wife. Ling Han's glare caused a cold chill to shoot up the little beast's spine. It couldn't help but shudder. Meanwhile, the elders from the 5 sects were seething with rage. So be it if you two have turned the tables. However, is there really any need for you to act all lovey-dovey in front of us? Just how little do you think of us? However, the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden was indeed like a lofty mountain that couldn't be overcome. If they wanted to resist her, they would need a genuine great elite. The few of them were far from enough. They could only look on wide-eyed as Ling Han and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden disappeared into the distance. Without enough elites, there was no way they could contain the two of them. However, the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden waved goodbye to Ling Han after accompanying him a short while. She had used up all of her holidays, and thus she had to return to the army encampment. She was a soldier after all, so her freedom to come and leave would naturally be restricted. She would obviously regain her freedom if she left the army, but the threat of the Xueqi meant that the Purple Moon Army was probably the safest place for her to be. Otherwise, she could only stay in Ling Han's Black Tower. However, this would similarly restrict her freedom. The little beast was naturally taken away by the heavenly phoenix divine maiden. Anyhow, even if she had been willing to give it to Ling Han, it was very likely that the little beast wouldn't have dared to follow him. He was someone who might kill and make it into a stew at any time. Ling Han continued to wander around. He had received the blessing of heaven and earth after opening the sky, and this blessing was finally displaying its usefulness at this moment. He was able to find Realm Spirit Stone after Realm Spirit Stone. Moreover, there was a certain pattern to his discoveries. It would be extremely easy for him to find Realm Spirit Stones in areas where the regulations of the immortal realm were dominant. On the contrary, he hadn't found a single Realm Spirit Stone in the areas where the regulations of the netherworld were dominant. This made a lot of sense. The blessing of heaven and earth that he had received had come from the immortal realm. In other words, it had nothing to do with the netherworld. Thus, in areas where the regulations of the netherworld were dominant, his luck was no different from other ordinary people's. After discovering this, Ling Han tried his best to search through the areas where the regulations of the immortal realm were dominant. Sure enough, he was able to find more and more Realm Spirit Stones. In just a month, he had already managed to find 9 Realm Spirit Stones. Although they were only as large as a pinky, the fact that he had found so many was still astounding. After some days, he finally reunited with Rabbit and the old Ginseng. While they were strolling through the battlefield, the earth suddenly started to tremor as if some mountain had collapsed. Fuck! It's the Netherworld army! An army appeared before them, and it consisted of at least 10,000 soldiers, the weakest of them at the Sun-Moon tier. Moreover, there were at least 100 heavenly body tier elites. Is the Netherworld seeking an all-out war? Chapter 1285 All-Out Assaul. An army of 1 million soldiers, all of them at the Sun-Moon tier. Moreover, the generals that led them were all heavenly body tier elites. It was a formidable army that was capable of crushing their enemies. The fact that heavenly body tier elites had now been deployed was a frightening development. With them in the front lines, would Eternal River tier elites be far behind? Was a calamitous war about to descend? Ling Han couldn't help but grimace. Was he a bringer of misfortune? It seemed like trouble would brew wherever he went. Humph! Someone in the Netherworld army discovered Ling Han, and 100 or so people immediately flew over, all of them wielding weapons that radiated with a sinister aura. Run! Ling Han immediately shouted. He wasn't scared of these 100 or so people. However, there were heavenly body tier elites in the Netherworld army, and he was definitely no match for these beings. Staying behind and fighting wouldn't be bravery, it would be stupidity. Rabbit and old Ginseng didn't need Ling Han's reminder at all. They had started to flee before he had even shouted in warning. Fuck! You two are so loyal! Ling Han shouted as he hurriedly activated the star-plucking step. You're the strongest out of us 3. If you don't stay back to fight, who will? The old Ginseng said. Exactly, Rabbit said in agreement. Stop! The Netherworld soldiers shouted. They pursued Ling Han and the others with vigor, yet the distance between them grew larger and larger. The difference in their speed was significant. Ling Han and the others fled far into the distance. However, just when they thought they had shaken off their pursuers, they heard a soft humph, and a person silently appeared before them. This person was dressed in white, and he was an extremely handsome man. If it weren't for his overwhelmingly sinister aura, one wouldn't be able to tell that he was a netherworld being. Anyhow, such a powerful and sinister aura indicated that this man possessed a very high cultivation level. He was a heavenly body tier elite. Ling Han's heart shuddered in apprehension. He reached out and grabbed Rabbit and the old Ginseng, one in each hand. He was prepared to enter the Black Tower at any moment. Now that he was facing such a powerful elite, there was no time for him to worry about exposing the secret of the Black Tower. There's no need to be so tense. I'm only here to ask you a question, the man in white said with a smile. His charismatic smile revealed his brilliant white teeth. Ling Han also smiled and said, "What will you do after asking the question?" "I'll naturally kill you all. This information is far too sensitive, and I can't leave any survivors," the man in white said calmly. "Fuck!" Ling Han laughed loudly and said, "Fine, ask away." "Young man, you're very courageous," the man in white exclaimed. He stared at Ling Han for a moment, and a look of surprise involuntarily spread across his face. What cultivation technique are you practicing? It's actually able to return you to youth? As a heavenly body tier elite, he could naturally see through Ling Han's disguise. This was unlike the heavenly phoenix maiden, who had only noticed that there was something strange about Ling Han. However, she hadn't been able to put her finger on what was wrong. Ling Han's expression became serious, and he said, "The cultivation technique that I practice is the most profound in heaven and earth, and it's peerless throughout the past and future. It's none other than the heavenly mystery technique." The man in white laughed heartily, and said, "Young man, you're like a newborn calf that isn't afraid of tigers. You even dare to joke around with me. So be it, I'll directly pluck your soul. That way, I'll find out about all your secrets." He reached over, and his hand transformed into a vast expanse of sky that bore down upon Ling Han. His palm had yet to arrive, yet a devastating aura had already rendered Ling Han immobile. This was the overwhelming power of a heavenly body tier elite. Regardless of how prodigious one was, there was no way they could withstand such power. However, it was a shame that he had only used his aura to suppress Ling Han, and not used his martial intent. Xiao! There was a flash, and Ling Han, Rabbit, and the old Ginseng all vanished. Ha! Astonishment spread across his face. What was going on? How had the three of them suddenly disappeared? If they had used a teleportation talisman, he should have been able to detect the fluctuations caused by the tearing of space. Spatial God Tool? He scanned the surroundings. As small as spatial God Tools could become, there should still be clues that revealed their location. However, he couldn't find anything out of the ordinary no matter how carefully he scanned the surrounding land. I don't believe this. He grabbed the earth within a 500-kilometer radius, and then used his profound power to refine the earth into nothingness. After obliterating everything else, the last remaining matter would naturally be the spatial God Tool. The power of heavenly body tier elites was incredible, and the earth in this place only consisted of ordinary dirt and stones. So, how could it withstand his refinement? The man in white easily obliterated the mountain of earth into nothingness. Doing so only took him a mere 3 days. However, after refining all this land, a look of pure astonishment spread across on the man in white's face. He hadn't found any spatial God Tool. How is this possible? Perhaps he didn't hide in a spatial God Tool, he murmured to himself. But there's no way he could have used a teleportation talisman. He wasn't willing to give up, and he continued to scour the surroundings. However, he came up empty-handed. If this were some other time, he wouldn't mind scouring this place for 4 or 5 years. After all, the lifespan of heavenly body tier elites was incredibly long. However, he was shouldering an important mission at this moment. I'll deal with the proper matters first, he muttered. After reaching this decision, he took a huge step and appeared hundreds of kilometers in the distance. Ling Han, Rabbit, and the old Ginseng all breathed a long sigh of relief. If the man in white had decided to stay here, they wouldn't have dared to come back out at all. Strange, why is the Netherworld suddenly launching an all-out assault? Ling Han asked in confusion. Although this was the two-realm battlefield, where battle and death were extremely common, deploying an army of 1 million Sun-Moon tier cultivators and thousands of heavenly body tier elites was still very surprising. Doing so would elevate the conflict from small skirmishes to all-out war. So be it if there are heavenly body tier elites. However, if Eternal River tier elites join in, even heavenly body tier elites will become nothing but cannon fodder. Ling Han's mind turned to the heavenly phoenix divine maiden. She was in the Purple Moon army at this moment, and such an army would definitely have to join the battlefield if a war did eventually break out. With the severity of the current situation, it wouldn't matter whether one had retired or not. They would be forced to enter the battlefield regardless. No, I have to hurry back to her. Ling Han reached a decision in his mind. He exited the Black Tower and hurried back to Wolfang City. The 3 legions were all camped outside Wolfang City, and they protected this line of defense with a curved horn formation. Once this line of defense fell, the Netherworld would be able to march through the city and invade the entire Cloud Apex planet. Ling Han was as quick as the wind, and he arrived at the encampment of the Purple Moon army in no time at all. However, upon his arrival, he discovered that the encampment was already devoid of people. It was clear that the Purple Moon army had already been deployed to meet the Netherworld army. It seems like The problem is far more severe than I had thought. Ling Han muttered to himself. By the looks of it, the Netherworld had even deployed Eternal River tier elites. Otherwise, there was no way the entire Purple Moon army would have been deployed. I'll enter Wolfang City to gather more information first. He turned around to enter Wolfang City. Upon entering, he was subject to strict examinations and questioning. Moreover, the entire city was filled with a thick aura of killing intent. The streets weren't bustling with people as they usually were, with the passers-by all appearing hurried as they rushed to their destinations. Their faces were filled with worry and anxiety. Ling Han stopped a Mountain River tier passerby. He tossed him a true origin stone before asking, "What's going on? Why is everyone so tense?" The man caught the true origin stone and hurriedly put it away. He then respectfully said, "Sir, you've probably come from an outside city, right? You won't believe this, the Netherworld has launched an all-out assault, and their army is being led by 3 Eternal River tier generals. They advanced several thousand kilometers in a single day, and it's only a matter of time before they arrive at the foot of Wolfang City." 3 Eternal River tier elites? Gasp. No wonder the entire Purple Moon army was deployed. It's extremely likely that the 2 other legions have also been fully deployed. Otherwise, how can they withstand an army of 1 million that's led by 3 Eternal River tier elites? Is an all-out war about to erupt? Chapter 1286 Using Public Office to Avenge a Private Resentmen. Following the Netherworld's invasion, the higher-ups of Wolfang City issued a notice stating that everyone had to report to the 3 armies within 3 days of receiving the notice. There, they would receive commands from the generals and fight together against the Netherworld. This time, it didn't matter whether one had retired from the army or not, nor did it matter how many merit points they had accumulated. All Immortal Realm elites still present in the 2-realm battlefield were obligated to participate in the battle against the Netherworld. Moreover, an urgent call for reinforcements had already been issued, and it wouldn't be long before more elites arrived at the 2-realm battlefield. The Netherworld had suddenly elevated the small skirmishes into a full-blown war, and it was crucial that all the elites on Cloud Apex Planet were mobilized to participate in the resistance. Ling Han immediately rushed to the front lines as well. Everyone had a responsibility to fight against the Netherworld's invasion. This was a clash between 2 realms, and the beings on Cloud Apex Planet would definitely be massacred if the Netherworld were to conquer the planet. The Netherworld wouldn't refine the Cloud Apex Planet into a realm pill, but what they did certainly wouldn't be any less brutal. Whatever they did, widespread death and destruction would be inevitable. Ling Han arrived at the front lines, only to see a tense standoff between 2 large armies. One of the armies was naturally from the Immortal Realm. This army was 700,000 strong, and it consisted of soldiers from the Purple Moon Army, Wind Rider's Army, and Holy Army, as well as a large number of mercenaries. However, the quality of the soldiers was varying and uneven. Some were at the Mountain River tier, while some were at the Sun Moon tier. However, at least half of the soldiers were at the Mountain River tier. This caused the overall quality of the army to fall drastically. In fact, the Immortal Realm army was absolutely no match for their opponent. The Netherworld army was 1 million strong, and all of their soldiers were at the Sun Moon tier. This stark contrast revealed just how terrifying a force the Netherworld had unleashed upon the Immortal Realm. The Netherworld possessed a crushing advantage. At this moment, Ling Han didn't have the spare time to worry about his personal affairs. He didn't search for the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, instead entering the army encampment and reporting his arrival. He didn't ask for any special treatment, and he was willing to listen to the commands of the generals. He would be a responsible soldier. The Netherworld launched several attacks, though they controlled the scale of the battle each time, only deploying a small number of Heavenly Body tier elites. The other members of the assault squads were all at the Sun Moon tier. Are they feeling us out? However, few people paid attention to this fact. Everyone was anxiously awaiting the arrival of the reinforcements. Right now, it was tremendously difficult for them to hold the Netherworld army at bay. Meanwhile, those who were smarter were also extremely confused. Why had the Netherworld army suddenly launched an all-out assault? One had to realize that Netherworld elites couldn't wield the regulations of the Immortal Realm after entering the Immortal Realm, so their battle prowess would fall by at least 3 or 4 stars. If both armies were of similar quality, such a drop in battle prowess would be like a death sentence. Moreover, the immortal realm didn't appear to be weaker than the netherworld. So, what was the point of launching such a huge assault? Perhaps there are profound treasures hidden on our side, and even the great elites of the netherworld have become interested. Thus, they've launched this offensive in the hopes of seizing this land. Even Eternal River tier elites have become interested. These treasures were definitely left by a great elite, who was at least at the consummate level of the Eternal River tier. Perhaps this treasure is the inheritance of a saint. That must be the case. Such speculations were wildly popular, and they quickly spread throughout the entire army. Many people became giddy upon hearing this, and they started to consider whether or not they should search for this hidden treasure. If it were truly the inheritance of a saint, it was entirely possible that they could become a supreme elite in a single step. The war had yet to be fought, yet many people had already started to think about other matters. The three commanding generals had no choice but to execute several people who were acting the most disobedient. This was necessary to ensure military discipline. Once the number of mercenaries increased, military discipline would naturally decrease. Mercenaries had no thought for the group, and it was very easy for them to reveal their own greed. After this slight hiccup, the Netherworld army launched several more assaults. However, the intensity of the battles was much lower than the noise that they generated. From beginning to end, all the battles were suppressed to a certain scale. With the passing of time, the reinforcements from the two imperial empires also started to arrive. More and more elites joined the Immortal Realm army, and it seemed as if the assault from the Netherworld was going to be stopped here and now. However, the arrival of these elites also reaffirmed people's belief that the Netherworld wasn't invading them to seize the land of Cloud Apex Planet. Instead, they were invading them to obtain the inheritance of an Eternal River tier or even saint. A soldier ran over to Ling Han and said, "Ling Han, the newly arrived captain wants to see you." None of the mercenaries had been incorporated into the legitimate armies, as they hadn't undergone any official training. Thus, it would be useless even if they were extremely powerful. There was simply no way they could merge into the military and cooperate smoothly. If they were forced into the three official armies, they would only end up making matters worse. As such, the mercenaries had been gathered together to form an independent army. If mutiny occurred, only this hastily put-together army would be affected. The battle prowess of the legitimate armies wouldn't be affected. Newly arrived captain? Ling Han found this a bit strange. Do I know this person? Why are they suddenly asking to see me? Whatever, I'll go if they want me to. He followed the soldier and arrived before a tent. The soldier stopped and respectfully said, "Captain Ling Han has arrived." This tent was huge, and it signified the lofty standing of its owner. "Let him enter," the person in the tent said. "Ha! This voice sounds a bit familiar," Ling Han said in his mind. Meanwhile, the soldier next to him had already opened the flap of the tent. A person immediately walked out. Xie Donglai. No wonder the voice sounded so familiar. No wonder they wanted to see me. So, it turns out that he wants to exact revenge. Ha 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 ha. Ling Han, you didn't expect this, did you? We meet again so soon. Xie Donglai sneered coldly, a mocking look on his face. He had initially planned to cultivate in seclusion and strive to become a heavenly body tier elite. When he succeeded, he would seek Ling Han and Faceless out and then kill them. He would make them pay a heavy price for humiliating him. However, the Netherworld had suddenly invaded, and even Great General Xie was deployed to the front lines. As a descendant of the Xie clan, he was also assigned to the position of captain. Coincidentally, Ling Han was under his direct command. He was naturally delighted by this fact, and the first thing he did upon realizing this was calling Ling Han over. He was going to flaunt his might as a superior. Ling Han couldn't help but chuckle and say, "Dumb C***NT, why is it you again? Have you not suffered enough yet?" Xie Donglai was infuriated upon hearing this. However, power was on his side, and he said, "In this place, I'm the captain and you're my soldier. You have to do as I say." "Oh. Then what commands does Captain want to issue?" Ling Han said with a chuckle. "Go, collect some firewood for me," Xie Donglai said with a humph. Right now, he was simply going to toy around with Ling Han. However, once battle erupted, he would send Ling Han to the most dangerous location on the battlefield. He would borrow the hands of the Netherworld to kill Ling Han. "No problem," Ling Han said with a nod. He turned around and left. Xie Donglai sneered coldly. What a coward. He submitted to me so readily. He stood there and waited for Ling Han to return. Once he returned with the firewood, he would continue to issue commands and force him to carry out other mundane tasks. If he dared to disobey, he would punish him according to military discipline. Haha, who told Ling Han to be his subordinate? However, the longer he waited, the darker his expression became. This was because Ling Han still hadn't returned. This brat actually dared to disobey my orders? He flared up in rage and immediately headed toward Ling Han's tent. Ling Han, he roared. His voice rumbled like thunder, revealing the rage that he was currently experiencing. The surrounding soldiers were astonished by this roar, and many people walked over to check out the commotion. **NT, why is it you again? Ling Han asked as he walked out of his tent. You dared to disobey my command, so I'm here to punish you, Xie Donglai said coldly. Ling Han had given him a legitimate excuse to flaunt his power. Chapter 1287 Aggressive Approach. Captain, dare I ask, what command did I disobey? Ling Han asked with a smile. He seemed extremely relaxed and unworried. Xie Donglai was lost for words. Before so many people, did he have the face to say that he had commanded Ling Han to collect firewood? If he said this, he would be making a fool of himself. Commanding a Sun Moon tier elite to collect firewood. What an utter joke. He could pick on Ling Han in private, but he wouldn't be able to do so in public. One didn't need to be a genius, and even those of average intelligence would be able to tell that he was purposefully picking on Ling Han. There were unspoken rules behind Xie Donglai's actions. He was the superior, and Ling Han was his subordinate. Thus, Ling Han would need to act exactly as he commanded. Otherwise, he would continue to pick on him until he submitted. However, once Ling Han yielded, he would only be pushed further and further, until there was no path of retreat. Thus, when dealing with petty superiors like Xie Donglai, one would only have two options: either submit completely or resist until the end. Ling Han naturally wouldn't submit. He had chosen to resist head-on. Xie Donglai's expression became dark. He was being challenged by a subordinate in public, and this made him feel extremely unhappy. Ling Han, you're disrespecting your superior, he shouted sharply. Oh, I'm disrespecting my superior by asking a simple question? How domineering of you. Ling Han laughed and said, the army of the Netherworld is only 50 kilometers away. Captain, why don't you bring your domineering aura over there and scare them all away? Fuck. To say nothing of me, even Xie Qian won't be able to force the Netherworld army to retreat. Discomfort gripped at Xie Donglai's mind as he glowered at Ling Han. He enjoyed a higher cultivation level, a stronger battle prowess, and also a more influential background. In fact, he was even Ling Han's superior at this moment. So, why was he still unable to deal with him? With a menacing edge to his voice he said, since you're my subordinate, let me teach you some moves, lest you be killed once you enter the battlefield. Captain, how caring and considerate of you, Ling Han said mockingly. Stop being a smart aleck. As a superior, it's my responsibility to guide my subordinates in cultivation. Xie Donglai felt like he had finally managed to grab onto a tangible point. Since he was more powerful, it was only natural that he should use his power to suppress Ling Han. If you don't want to accept my guidance, fine. But you'll have to chop 10,000 pickles of firewood within a day. He was afraid that Ling Han would obey on the surface but resist in private again. Thus, he added a time limit to the task. Ling Han scoffed and said, why does young Master Xie need so much firewood? Do you want to hold a barbecue? If that's the case, you should have brought a few more servants from your home. This is the army, so why are you still acting like some mighty young master? What an absolute joke. Why, you little troublemaker, you actually dare to challenge your superior's might. Come, show me if you've got the right to challenge me. Xie Donglai immediately launched an attack at Ling Han. Wang! He extended a hand and flipped it over, and then pushed it down toward Ling Han. A formidable pressure instantly enveloped Ling Han, crashing down on him and trying to make him kneel. There was a difference of 2 minor levels between them, and thus the disparity between their power was genuinely huge. Ling Han remained proudly standing. Under the crushing pressure of Xie Donglai's power, streaks of divine patterns started to appear on his now glowing body. If one looked carefully, they would see that these divine patterns were actually 9 divine dragons, each with a unique appearance. 9 dragons' tyrant body art. As the legend said, the 9 sons of the dragon were all different. Right now, these 9 divine dragons still had yet to become true dragons. Some were missing horns, while others were missing claws. However, these divine dragons would gradually become more perfect following Ling Han's improvement in the body art. When these 9 divine dragons became true dragons, it would signify that Ling Han had reached the pinnacle level of the 9 dragons' tyrant body art and advanced to the level of a saint. What? It's actually 9 different true dragons? Cultivation techniques that have to do with true dragons are all incredibly powerful. No wonder he dares to challenge Xie Donglai. He's legitimately got some skill. However, the difference between their cultivation levels is too great. He's destined to be suppressed. Say, this Xie Donglai person is so petty. He's still trying to avenge his private resentments at this kind of time. The onlookers chattered among themselves, some of them expressing their sympathy toward Ling Han and others showing their disdain towards Xie Donglai's pettiness. However, not a single one of them stepped forward to stop the conflict. They were all mercenaries, and none of them had any strong friendship with each other. So, why would they risk offending Xie Donglai to help Ling Han? Instead of helping, many were instead excited to see how this conflict would pan out. The 9 dragons unleashed their might, inhaling and exhaling clouds and mists as they did. Ling Han stood as tall and as proud as a mountain. The 9 dragons' tyrant body art wasn't the only thing that he practiced, with his godly bones also nearly as tough as level 8 godly metal. Right now, someone at the consummate level wanted to suppress him? How laughable. Xie Donglai, how much longer do you want to flip your hands? What on earth are you playing at? Perhaps you really do want to hold a barbecue? Ling Han said with a chuckle. Fucking brat. Xie Donglai whispered under his breath. He, an elite at the consummate level of the Sun Moon tier, was actually unable to contain a measly cultivator at the medium extreme. Moreover, this was in front of so many onlookers. How much face would he lose? He knew that Ling Han was peculiar, him being able to kill Zhu Liyun and all. However, he had been helped by Faceless at that time, and he had also relied on the might of the Misty Soul capturing flower. Thus, Xie Donglai thought very little of Ling Han's actual battle prowess. Moreover, he was a 4-star genius himself, so it wouldn't matter little even if Ling Han were also a 4-star genius. This would cancel out, and he would still enjoy a crushing advantage of 2 minor levels. Thus, he had thought that he would be able to suppress Ling Han with a mere flip of his hands. Not only would that have been a slap to Ling Han's face and a good way to exact his revenge, but it would have also been a good way to send a warning to the other mercenaries. It would make them think twice about disobeying him, their superior. To his surprise, Ling Han was actually a difficult opponent to suppress. Right now, it was he who was between a rock and a hard place. Boos rang out in the surroundings. Shut up! Xie Donglai roared. He charged toward Ling Han, his hands transforming into claws that swiped at him. Boom! He had clearly activated a secret technique, with his hands transforming into pitch-black demonic claws that were as large as a house. These claws had a cold sheen to them, and it was as if they were made of metal. Gasp! Could this be the black gold demonic eagle claw? According to legends, black gold demonic eagles are terrifying beasts that can tear through godly metal that corresponds to their level with a single swipe of their claws. If this strike lands, that person is done for. With so many people present, there were naturally some who could identify this attack. These people immediately identified the secret technique that Xie Donglai had unleashed. Boom! The 2 claws smashed down, and it was as if even space was about to shatter apart. Patches of uncanny black swirls appeared in the surroundings. Ling Han didn't plan to face this attack head-on, so he immediately jumped to the side and dashed into the crowd of onlookers. Xie Donglai wielded his demonic claws as he chased after Ling Han. Pang! There was a resounding boom, and several people were instantly sent flying. They spat blood as they collapsed to the ground, and many of them started to curse in fury. Chaos descended upon the crowd. There's no animosity between you and the others, yet you actually attacked them with such viciousness. Xie Donglai, Might you be a spy of the netherworld? Ling Han was completely unscathed. There were so many people to ease the pressure off him, so he could easily deal with the shock waves of Xie Donglai's attacks. Xie Donglai was about to explode in anger. Fuck, you actually dare to slander me? However, he was too angry to speak, so he continued to wield his demonic claws as he chased after Ling Han. A netherworld spy is killing people. Ling Han shouted at the top of his lungs as he ran toward the crowds of people. Pang pang pang. The crowds of people were unable to dodge in time, and many were sent flying by Xie Donglai's wanton attacks. Right now, everyone could clearly see that Xie Donglai was attacking the Immortal Realm encampment like a crazed maniac. Chapter 1288 War breaks out. A chance has come. This was the camp for mercenaries, and there was a heavenly body tier elite on standby here. He was the chief commander, and subordinate to him were 12 captains, who took charge of the whole mercenaries camp respectively. This also meant that Xie Donglai was only one of the 12 captains, and could not possibly do as he liked. He was demented and attacked his subordinates in the camp. This was something that everyone could see, and there were as many as a few hundred victims. The effect of this was naturally extremely negative, so soon enough, an elite appeared and stopped Xie Donglai. Consecutively, that heavenly body tier chief commander called Xie Donglai over, and reprimanded him severely before shooing Xie Donglai off, and commanding him to make amends for his crime through meritorious service. Ling Han couldn't help but feel rueful. It was really easy to do things when you had someone in the higher echelons backing you up. He had wounded so many people, yet had only received a scolding for it. If it had been anyone else, putting everything else aside, his position as team captain would definitely have been revoked. As the descendant of an Eternal River tier elite, Xie Donglai had special privileges everywhere, so it was no wonder that he was so arrogant. He had obviously seen Ling Han duck into the masses, yet still attacked without reservations. He was completely certain that he would get off with a smack on the hand. However, though Xie Donglai had become the most unwelcomed, the most hated captain, Ling Han was not any better off. Though it was Xie Donglai who had inflicted injuries, Ling Han was the one who had drawn the disaster to them, so he was similarly detested. Ling Han was indifferent to it though. He had not come here to make any friends. Once this battle was over, they were naturally going to go their separate ways. Furthermore, after this matter, Xie Donglai did not come and make trouble with Ling Han again. This was very abnormal. Yet Ling Han was guessing that Xie Donglai was preparing an even crueler vengeance. The mindset of this kind of person was very easy to guess. It could be none other than using the netherworld beings to get rid of him. Just nice. I planned the same, Ling Han thought. He, too, did not want to be targeted secretly by a stupid bird all the time. He had to resolve the matter as soon as possible. If he wanted to use the netherworld armies to kill someone, there were two ways. Firstly, draw the person into the proximity of an elite of the netherworld, such as heavenly body tier. Then, a sliver of the shockwave created from one of their attacks would be enough to crush a sun-moon tier completely. Yet Ling Han was not an idiot. Would he still continue on that path if he saw a heavenly body tier elite ahead? This would require Xie Donglai to compel him, but Xie Donglai would also be placed in a dangerous situation because of this. He hated Ling Han, but it was absolutely impossible that he wanted to die with Ling Han. Then, it could only be the second method, and that was to draw Ling Han into the depths of the army camp of the netherworld and use innumerable sun-moon tiers to gang up on Ling Han and wear him down to death. Although this would also cause Xie Donglai to be under siege as well, his cultivation level was higher, so he would definitely last longer than Ling Han. Furthermore, he still had trump cards to escape. Once he saw Ling Han was dead, he would be able to break out of the siege. Since he was already dead, who could say that Xie Donglai had sent Ling Han into the depths of the enemy troops? Didn't they see that even he had rushed inside? This was called taking the lead, and should be rewarded. There is 80% that is what he's planning. Ling Han had a very accurate grasp of Xie Donglai's mindset. This kind of profligate young master was very easy to guess. Then let's just see who would be falling into whose trap. A few peaceful days passed, and the netherworld finally started a large-scale battle. This time, all the major troops of the Immortal Realm all joined together to fight against their strong foes. The mercenaries' camp that Ling Han was at was naturally pulled in as well. To be honest, In comparison to the regular armies, they felt like they were about to become cannon fodder. Regular armies all practiced combat in formations that allowed them to attack together. 10 people would make one small team, and 100 would be a large team, which could exhibit 50% or even 60% of their overall power. This was very frightening, as this meant that about 20 people would be able to boost their battle prowess by 1 star. Yet the mercenaries would be fighting on their own, and no matter how strong a lone soldier was, they could possibly be overwhelmed by their enemy's advantage in numbers. Ling surveyed the scene from higher up, and saw dust everywhere ahead of them. A great number of Netherworld elites was charging over, and they were also similarly a mixture of various groups. There were regular military and mercenary teams as well. He could see this clearly. Regular armies moved in neat formations, maintaining their positions even when they were charging an attack, but the mercenaries were different. At one moment, they would be charging ahead, and at another, they would be hanging back. Sometimes, they would head left, and at other times, they would be heading right. They were completely moving at their own pace. Some people were even giants 30,000 meters tall. Their gigantic footsteps descended down, and directly stomped over. This was definitely not Sun Moon tier. Sun Moon tiers could not possibly form such an astonishing figure. Heavenly Body tier elite. Hence, the stomp of this foot was extremely frightening. Even the heaven and earth had darkened. The foot had not even descended, and the ground had already cracked. All the people below looked overwhelmed with horror. They were really going to die without having done anything worthwhile. Humph. However, the immortal realm naturally had elites as well. A person moved, stabbing out with his sword. A grand light slashed over. That giant foot was instantly severed. The severed limb still descended, but no longer had the might of a stomp. Ho, you actually managed to disperse the might of an attack from my figure, so you are not that weak after all. Come battle with me. An elite of the Netherworld leaped up into the skies, issuing a challenge to the immortal realm. As you wish. An elite of the immortal realm flew up into the skies astride sword light and began to battle that elite from the Netherworld. Instantly, a figure 30 km tall once again appeared, and several sword lights with the same length similarly slashed through the air, its might not the slightest bit weakened. Charge. Even more elites charged over. Charge. Ling and the others shouted out as well. Influenced by the boiling blood and fighting spirit in the battlefield, they did not bother about life or death now, either. They only wanted to have a vigorous battle as well. Dong dong dong. The war drums rang out loudly, cheering on the soldiers of both sides. They had some kind of rhythm, and had the effect of stimulating fighting spirit. Everyone did not care for themselves. In this kind of battle, no one could possibly have a way out, because there was completely no way of retreat. The people behind them were continuously charging ahead. Moreover, there were also a few elites sitting on the gigantic war elephant observing the battle coldly. If there appeared any deserters, they would move at the first instant to get rid of them. In a battle between two armies, morale was the most important. Charge! Xueqi called out loudly. He took the lead, and led his army into the ranks of the Netherworld, and went further and further in. At this time, everyone had been blinded by the slaughter and bloodshed. They only knew that either they had to kill or they would be killed, and when they felt the pressure increase further and further, only then did they shockingly realize that they had already penetrated into the depths of the Netherworld army, and only less than 3,000 of their initial 10,000 comrades remained. They had already charged to this place, so how could their pressure not be heavy? How could the price they paid for their charge not be heavy? How did we charge over to this place? Quick retreat! The remaining 3,000 called out. This was not dauntlessly killing their enemies. This was completely going to their deaths. Ling was also driven into a slight frenzy by the battle, and had completely not foreseen that Xueqi would actually be so demented. He brought his whole army into their graves just to kill him. Charge back! Everyone came to realization, and no longer blindly charged forwards under Xueqi's lead. Instead, they turned around to counterattack. How strong was the power with all these people added together? Even Xueqi could not possibly stop them. However, their lone unit had entered deeply into the Netherworld army's files, so how difficult was it to charge back out? Terrible cries rang out unendingly, and the remaining 3,000 people were being worn away at an astonishing pace. Furthermore, they were also a troop of mercenaries, so in a time of danger, they naturally would only care for themselves, completely lacking a teamwork mindset. The troops were divided, and death and injury came even faster. Xie Donglai showed a cruel grin. As he was sacrificing a whole troop of 10,000 to be buried with Ling Han, this brat could be considered to have died a worthy death. Not clear whether it means 150 to 160%, or if the author implies that they'd get in each other's way otherwise, so it'd be difficult to show even half the power per every person otherwise. Chapter 1289 Demented. Xie Donglai's eyes were focused on Ling Han. He wanted to witness with his own eyes Ling Han's death, and only then would he escape. They were both in the Sun-Moon tier, and he was definitely capable of lasting longer than Ling Han. Furthermore, he had deliberately not used his full power, because he did not want to be ganged up on by too many people from the netherworld. That way, he could calmly watch Ling Han head to his death. Ling Han naturally discovered Xie Donglai's gaze. It was so filled with resentment and hatred, like a blade aimed directly at his back, so how could he possibly not feel it? He shook his head internally. This man's desire to get revenge on him had really reached the extreme. He would actually sacrifice a whole team of 10,000 soldiers to kill him. But upon further thought, this team of 10,000 soldiers did not belong to his Xie clan. Even if they all died, so what? Damn it! A cold sharpness flickered in Ling Han's eyes. He suddenly turned around and charged towards Xie Donglai, loudly calling out, "Brother Xie, let us kill the enemy together." He drew out the divine demon sword, and a murderous aura suddenly shot skywards, like the arrival of the Emperor himself. The surrounding netherworld elites were all sent flying. There were some who lost their heads, or had severed arms and legs. As long as their battle prowess had not reached the consummate level of Sun-Moon tier, they would definitely be incapable of escaping this calamity. Ling Han forcefully charged to right in front of Xie Donglai. His eyes narrowed, and a spiritual barrage suddenly shot out. 7 kill subduing soul technique. Woo! Xie Donglai's movements instantly paused. Being on the receiving end of this kind of attack to his spirit, he couldn't help but be affected. However, as the descendant of the great General Xie, who himself was a top-grade genius, how could he possibly not have learned a technique to train his spirit? His spirit was extremely strong. Thus, he merely paused under the 7 kill subduing soul technique, and immediately went back to normal. But it should be known that they were in the midst of a chaotic battle, and swords and sabers were attacking everywhere. It was only that one instant, and Xie Donglai had received a few strikes. Thankfully, his defensive origin power had not dispersed, so he was not too heavily wounded. "Damn it," he uttered angrily. At first, it should be him leading Ling Han into a trap, so why had the tables turned on him and it was he who had fallen into Ling Han's trap? If it were not for the fact that he was strong enough, and his spirit had been cultivated to a sturdy level, he would not have just been wounded with that momentary pause just now. Die! He could no longer suppress the killing intent in his heart, turning his weapon on Ling Han. A golden saber revealed itself, a black aura washing out. It was filled with corrosive ability, making it seem like even the air itself was about to melt. The netherworld beings around them all watched in confusion. Why had internecine strife broken out on the other side? However, they did not mind. They just had to kill them both. Pang 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 pang. Ling Han and Xie Donglai were deeply embroiled in a heavy siege. Not only did they have to stay on guard against each other, they also had to deal with the attacks from the netherworld. And this was not just 1 or 2 strikes. As less and less people from this lone unit of theirs were left alive, the pressure they endured became heavier and heavier. In theory, Ling Han should have died long ago. He was merely in the medium extreme of the Sun-Moon tier, so it was definitely impossible that he could last longer than someone in the peak stage of the consummate level. However, in truth, Ling Han was still very energetic, looking like he was definitely not retreating before he killed Xie Donglai. This was unimaginable to Xie Donglai. Why did this guy still not die? "The one who will be dying is you," Ling Han replied coldly. "For the sake of a personal grudge, you actually sacrificed a whole unit. Being so demented, what right do you still have to call yourself human? Hey, with a whole army accompanying you to death, are you still unwilling to rest in peace obediently?" Xie Donglai brandished his saber in a swift slash. Golden light danced, his attacks very pronounced, but the black corrosive chi was filled with darkness, forming a powerful contrast. You really can't be saved. Ling Han did not speak any further. This mind of Xie Donglai was rotten down to the core, and he was completely irredeemable, and there was no meaning in saving him. Kill. He used the divine demon sword, and the lightning sword technique was in play. The surrounding netherworld elites were all sent flying as they were completely no match for it. If the elites of the heavenly body tier did not move, then even the consummate level of the Sun Moon tier would have to be wary of Ling Han, who was wielding the divine demon sword. Of course, if one could still surpass 3 to 4 stars of battle prowess on the basis of consummate level, they were still capable of bulldozing Ling Han. For example, Xie Donglai. As he brandished his saber in attack, Ling Han did not dare take his attacks head-on, but rather used the star-plucking step to dodge and evade. In any case, there were many soldiers of the netherworld here, so he would just use them as shields. The two of them battled for a long time in the netherworld's ranks, and this gradually attracted the attention of netherworld elites. As a streak of divine sense swept over them, both Ling Han and Xie Donglai felt a full-body coldness. Merely 2 Sun Moon tiers, and you actually dare charge here. A large hand descended from the skies, slapping down on Ling Han and Xie Donglai, who were still engaged in battle. There were various heavenly bodies floating above that large hand, and it was as if the whole heavens were pressing down on them. A heavenly body tier elite. Xie Donglai's expression shifted drastically. He no longer cared about seeing Ling Han die with his own eyes. At this time, his own survival was more important. He hurriedly drew out a divine seal, and slapped it on himself. Suddenly, golden light spread out, wrapping around him tightly. When he'd returned to the Xie clan, he asked for another life-saving seal. Xiao. He immediately turned into a streak of golden light that shot to the heavens. You still think of fleeing? Ling Han had foreseen this. With his own body as a bow, the ultimate arrow was activated. Xiao, an arrow shot out, chasing quickly towards Xie Donglai. The methods of Eternal River tier were too astonishing. Even if it was just a carelessly made divine seal, it had powerful might. If it was only the annihilating dragon star arrow, it definitely would not be able to catch up to him. Thus, Ling Han directly used the ultimate arrow, spilling out all the power in his body in that single instant. Pooh! The arrow was extraordinarily fast. A streak of blood splattered, and Xie Donglai released a terrible cry. Then, he actually dropped down from the skies. It was unimaginable. Someone in the consummate level of the Sun Moon tier, who furthermore was a 4-star genius, had actually been wounded by an arrow shot by someone in the medium extreme. Still, who asked Xie Donglai to only think of running for his life in his rush, thinking that he was completely safe once he used the divine seal. He was naturally going to relax. How could he have imagined that there would be such a divine arrow chasing after him? However, it was also precisely because Xie Donglai was strong enough, and the divine seal had borne him away fast enough, that this arrow only wounded him, and not tore him into pieces directly. Interesting. That large hand fished over, and caught hold of Xie Donglai. Then, it turned back around, and grabbed out at Ling Han. Presently, Ling Han had lost all strength, and was even incapable of maintaining his adult state. With a PU, he turned into an infant. How could he dare face this head-on? With a flash, he entered into the Black Tower. Without recovering his power, it was useless even if he came back out. The large hand caught nothing, and a figure rapidly appeared subsequently. It was a grey-robed man. His figure and appearance was all very normal, but his beard was actually made out of multiple strands of meat, which were still squirming around. The mere sight would make anyone shiver. Xie Donglai was currently being held up in his hand. However, he had lost consciousness, all 4 limbs drooping and blood dripping endlessly. If he had known that this would be the result, he would not have penetrated deeply into the army ranks with a single unit even if it killed him. He had dragged himself into danger as well. Where is he? The elite with a beard of meat surveyed the scene, and looked surprised. This Ling Han actually disappeared without a trace. A minor character merely in the Sun Moon tier had actually managed to disappear without a trace completely without his knowledge. Interesting, he repeated, his divine sense expanding. He was determined to find Ling Han. This kind of reminds me of Davy Jones from Pirates of the Caribbean. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.